Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. Oh, and I need to turn off my sound on the other video. So, if you would like to be notified when I go live, you can text Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999 and receive messages when I go live. So, with that said, how is everybody doing? What is new and exciting in everybody's world? I'm hoping that that you're able to experience peace and yeah, there's been a lot going on in the world, and I know a lot of people are really struggling with it. So I just hope that everybody's able to kind of find their center and a sense of stability and calm in the midst of all of this. Thank you, Jack. He says I got some questions queued up. Good deal. JJ says I'm glad to be away from the news. Yeah. Yes, I can understand. And I apologize for not being here last week. Our refrigerator died on Christmas. And so, we were taking everything out. We cleaned it extensively. Then we put everything back in. Long story short, that didn't work. Then we took everything back out again. And um, things were probably out of the fridge for a lot longer than they should have been. And last week I started feeling funny and I kind of contributed to all of the chaos going on in the US at the time. And then I realized, I'm like, no, I actually think I might have food poisoning. So, uh, yeah, I was really sick that entire night. So, uh, yes, so I apologize for not being here. Um, and uh, I I do have a couple questions as well, Jack. So I'll start while you're getting yours, I'll get mine and we'll see where that goes. If you guys have a question for the live stream, you can, well, preferably you'd be able to email them to me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. That tends to be a more effective way of reaching me because you can write a longer message. So some people have been messaging me through Textedly, which is the text service. If you want to like once you subscribe, entering Dana Live to the number 22999, you can also text as well. And yeah, but email is probably better. Anyways, so I have two questions for this week. The first one is from Mo, who says, let's see. I enjoyed years, decades really, of personal growth and showed up trusting and forthcoming and sharing with the intent of connecting and growing. But lately I'm noticing some major resistance to this pattern of showing up this way. When I notice, uh, what I notice is that there is an immediate sharing of trust in an online personal growth group for the group leaders and the participants. Now my hackles go up and I'm wary of sharing too much information. I want to protect myself and I am protective of others as I don't want myself or them to be taken advantage of, even though it's encouraged to let it all out, but I wonder if it's safe. I am noticing almost cult-like features in these personal/self help groups that raise my anxiety, doubt, lack of trust in others. Likely some of this is due to my own trauma, but I think it is healthy protection and even healthy paranoia since I don't really know or see these folks I interact with in an online situation. I want to think the best of people and trust, and I truly want to connect since I feel disconnected from my own family of origin, but my childlike innocence seems to be crumbling. Is this a good thing? Am I growing up and out of patterns that leave me vulnerable? I hope so. Thank you, Mo. So, here are my thoughts on this. Um, it's kind of what you share online is, I think, is reasonable and understandable and appropriate to have levels of comfort and levels of discomfort with regards to what you're sharing. I've seen this as well with certain types of kind of oversharing or sharing a lot very early on before that trust, emotional trust is established. And that, and then that's uncomfortable. I personally don't find that appropriate. I had a professor when I was in my master's program for counseling who encouraged that. That was one of our exercises uh, early on, like the first or second week of class, was to basically share our life story in kind of all the gritty detail. And it was me and another student that both were like, not comfortable doing that. It wasn't because we didn't feel or because we were concerned that there was some sort of hidden agenda or that people were going to use it against us. It was just the well, at least for me, it was the feeling of, certain parts of my life are very reserved for my inner circle. And Uh, and I'm not an open book. I used to be an open book, but I think that's poor boundaries, frankly. So I guess I would encourage you to kind of frame it in a similar way of uh, this kind of you don't need to be an open book. And frankly, you don't need to be an open book in order for personal growth to occur. I agree with having a healthy degree of skepticism, especially online, because the world can see, and there are a lot of predatory people online, and you can't tell who they are. But if you're just not comfortable sharing certain things, that's okay. You're not comfortable sharing. I don't think that means that you're overly guarded, and I don't think that means that you have issues of trust with other people. To me, it's a sign of healthy boundaries. So it's okay, regardless. And frankly, I really feel um, with people who do encourage kind of high levels of sharing in a space like that. Excuse me, I've got a cough. When they do when they do encourage high levels of sharing, I feel like that's poor boundaries on their end. So uh, it's okay to not agree with what others want you to do. I feel like that's an important step in um, kind of autonomy and boundaries and um, getting more, stepping more into that uh, kind of locus of control where you decide, you set the pace, not being persuaded by other people to set the pace in terms of what does or doesn't work for you. So, okay. And then I have a long question here. I'm going to try to kind of condense it a little bit for a couple different reasons. I think mainly it's sharing a lot of information, and I don't know if this person intended to have all of this shared. So, kind of long story short, she has been in a marriage for 12 years. Her husband has been a very quote unquote a very passive and nice guy. He's never hit her, called her a name, hardly raises his voice. However, he is impulsive. He's not responsible. I would also add he's not accountable for his behavior. He's very good at and comfortable with lying, has little to no empathy or remorse, has had sex with her several times while she's been sleeping. And it sounds like no issues really ever seem to get resolved. He doesn't spin whenever she catches him uh, either not doing something or in a lie or something like that. He doesn't spin it around and blame her. He just acts like he's a big dummy. These are her words. He acts like a big dummy who can't get it right, but he never does anything to change it. And when she began discussing divorce, he brought up that he had experienced torturous childhood sexual abuse. And he also disclosed more deception on his end in an effort to put it all out on the table. Um, she's begged him to go to therapy. He hasn't. He says that he wants to feel bad about his actions, but he just doesn't. He thinks that he might have a personality disorder or possibly be a sociopath. So the first part of her question is, would a narcissist have the self-awareness to suggest such things? A narcissist, not so much. A sociopath, yes. So, or at a minimum, and frankly, I would describe a lot of this behavior as sociopathic. It's pathological lying, it's lack of empathy, it's lack of remorse. There's a blatant disregard for the rights of others, regardless of whether or not he's actually clinically diagnosed as antisocial personality disorder. It's sociopathic behavior. And even if you want to get rid of the word sociopathic behavior, it's all highly problematic. Any one of these things that you're describing, that's absolute poison to a relationship. Um, so could he be unintentionally manipulating you? Well, absolutely. If you've caught him in numerous lies, then lying is a form of manipulation. So right there, yes. Oh, she asked, why is this so difficult for me to wrap my head around? And my guess, the answer to that question would be because on one end, he has really great behavior, but on the other end, he has very deeply destructive behavior. And that can be very difficult to reconcile the two. She says, he doesn't call me names or even blame me for his behavior. If anything, my reaction to him is at times mean. I've turned into the angry one. His behavior is crazy making. Yes, well, that tends to be the result of being on the receiving end of crazy making behavior. When a person is chronically lying, when they're not accepting accountability, when there's no empathy, no remorse for the hurt that they've done, when it's nothing but excuse after excuse as to why they continue to do what they do, that's infuriating. So, uh, let's see. She says, I struggle with choosing to stay with him as he navigates therapy and behavior change versus leaving him for my own sanity. My fear is that he's telling me what I want and need to hear in order to stay, and I will not know the truth of today until years from now. Please help. Is there a support group or examples or guidance or therapy or anything? Thank you in advance. So, okay. Well, it's okay. So let me back up. Initially, you'd said that you would suggest the therapy. He was against it. Now it seems like he's kind of changed his tune now that you're wanting a divorce. At a minimum, uh, I would encourage you to think of it this way. You need to do what you need to do in order to keep yourself safe. It doesn't matter why he's doing what he's doing. That might sound cold, that might sound cruel, but it's not, because his behavior is deeply destructive to you, especially the having sex with you, raping you while you're sleeping. That's a problem. So uh, the chronic lying, the deceit, the um, kind of lack of accountability, this is such deeply problematic behavior. I would get clear with yourself if you do decide to stay, as far as what kind of changes that you would need to see and in what time frame. But here's the problem. Here's the problem when trust is broken, and when he's already spent 12 years of not caring, and now he only seems to care that you're getting a divorce. That level of motivation he has right now to get therapy may or may not last. And even still, uh, if you were to get into therapy, if he gets into individual therapy, there's a very good chance, if he is highly manipulative, which he is, based on everything that you've said, that he's going to spin things and present his behavior in its own light. Uh, so we can't save other people. You can't, there's a difference between supporting and loving a person and supporting and loving their behavior. And in instances like this, where it is so destructive, especially, I mean, outside of what he's doing while he's supposedly sleeping, the lying, that's psychological abuse. And the constant, the lying, the denying, all of this, the lack of accountability. If if you're feeling like I need to leave this relationship for my sanity, then this speaks to me of, okay, there's many, many, many boundary violations that have occurred over 12 years. And um, having to sacrifice your sanity in order to make a relationship work is never a good trade. So at a minimum, I would encourage you to get some distance. Also, back to what I was going to say about trust. When trust is broken in a relationship, especially to this degree, because this is to a very high degree. There's not much more outside of, well, I was going to say committing crimes, but he's been sexually assaulting you while you sleep. Um, when a person breaches trust in such egregious ways on an ongoing basis and doesn't change their behavior, doesn't acknowledge it, doesn't do the work of repairing the damage, it's when trust isn't present, an authentic relationship isn't present. And I think it's important to realize that each person has to do the work. When people talk about making a relationship work, it's a 50-50 thing, right? So one person can't do 100% of it. Like, you can't be responsible for 100% of making the relationship work. He hasn't been doing his part ever for the 12 years. And the added part to that is when trust is broken, especially to such a profound degree where it's, kind of lying about anything and everything, and a very clear, blatant disregard for your boundaries, is he could be lying to you in numerous ways. And it would be very, very difficult to ever tell when he's telling the truth. That to me is the bigger issue with lying. It's not so much the lies themselves, although, that's frustrating and annoying and crazy making. And also that's the same thing with cheating. It's not about the other person. It's about how can I ever trust you again? And he would have to do the work of rebuilding all that trust. But because his behavior, when things are supposedly good, which I would even question if they really are good, because obviously during those quote unquote good times, he's lying and doing other things, right? And he's not being accountable for his part, and he's not being responsible and all that. So I'd kind of put that back and say, is he really that great when things are good? Or is he just pretty good at hiding what he's lying about? So these are just some points for you to consider. In terms of therapy, I would encourage you to get some therapy, because he doesn't have empathy or remorse according to him. So there's not a lot of feelings for him to process on this, but there are for you. So you've been on the receiving end of all of this hurt. Like you said, it's been uh, this constant crazy making and victimization is making you really angry, which it should. That's an appropriate emotion to feel from really inappropriate behavior. So I would encourage you to get into some therapy and to really work on boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. So, and again, with his childhood, and the last kind of point I'll mention about this, with, him saying, oh, I was tortured, I was, sadistically went through this really horrendous childhood sexual abuse. The reality is, even if that did happen, uh, that's not yours to fix. And that doesn't mean, uh, well, it's not yours to fix. And um, I would, that, and it sounds very manipulative to me, frankly. So, uh, and if he has a history of kind of pathological lying, I would even question if that was really true. But the thing is, you'll never know. And, there we are again, back to square one of what it is. At a minimum, right now, you can't trust him, and he's physically dangerous. So I hope that you're able to do what you need to do in order to keep yourself safe and sane. That's the basics of any relationship. So, as is respect. and that's not there on his end. So just some things to think about. Okay, so let me scroll up. Yeah, UNA was saying narcissists can be really good actors and can appear to show empathy very convincingly. Yes, I would say that's probably more so for the sociopaths of the world. Um, narcissists really tend to, uh, and there's a scale, right? Like mild to severe, but their ego kind of gets in the way of them thinking about other people or them empathizing with other people, even to uh, like a mild degree. But yeah, the highly manipulative people of the world, especially the ones that have some degree of emotional intelligence, absolutely know what to say in order to get their way. Look at any crime TV type show where they have the killer on trial. And more often than not, what do you see? You see a bunch of words. You see, sometimes you'll see tears, but you'll definitely see a lot of fake crying. You'll see a person acting the part, is what you see. And it can be very difficult to kind of sort out how does this exist? How do these two people exist? What really happened here? But and this is kind of where it goes back to boundary standards and deal breakers. In certain situations, um, you I think really in all situations, kind of the question to ask is um, goes back to like your standards and your deal breakers of what do you need in a relationship, and taking the focus off of, well, are this person's intentions sincere? Can they change? Can they get help? What about them? Would a narcissist do this? What all of that is going to just spin you in circles. Shifting the focus to yourself and figuring out, what do I need in a relationship? What works for me? Where are my deal breakers? If I am going to try to make this situation work, or hang around and see if it'll work, how long am I willing to stay? And how much time and energy and money am I willing to throw at this? And what kind of changes do I need to have happen? If somebody has, well, I'll stop there. That's where a lot of your answers are. Kind of knowing, I will say though, the challenge with boundaries is, uh, I guess, first understanding that you have a right to them. You have a right to have boundaries. It's okay for certain behavior of any kind or situations, no matter how well intended, to not be okay with you. So it's getting grounded enough in yourself to realize what is for you and what is not for you. What is nourishing? What is draining? What is a good situation? What is a bad situation? What is a workable relationship? Or what are workable situations within a relationship and what are not? And those are your boundaries, your standards, your deal breakers, and nobody else has to agree with them. So kind of owning that is a big part of it. Okay, so let's see. Um, 100%. Amber says, I think sometimes we ask those questions because we actually love them and want to make things work. We want to hold on to the hope that they are not pathologically sick so we can keep the relationship. 100%. Yes. The the challenge with this kind of thing, well, let me back up a little bit. When people tend to have that mindset, and I get it because I was there too. It's a very kind of all or nothing mindset. It's either, if this person has a pathological a personality disorder or pathological behavior, then it's not workable. But if it's not pathological, if they're not diagnosed as a narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath, if it's not DSM worthy of a diagnosis, then it's somehow workable. But the reality is, and this is where the confusion lies, is there's a lot of gray ground between those two. And this is where it goes down to a person doesn't need to have pathological behavior or be pathologically sick in order for that relationship to not be right for you. And frankly, um, kind of even asking that question of, oh, is this person, uh, I really hope that this, outrageous behavior of theirs isn't pathological. So therefore, then we can get fixed and everything can be fine and we can have this relationship. That has a lot more to do with kind of our own um, probably anxious forms of attachment, unresolved codependency, um, very kind of skewed ideas about boundary standards, deal breakers, relationships, commitment, love, a lot of things there. People, I think, really begin to kind of move forward in their healing when they're able to start seeing the gray area. And because, again, I've been there. A lot of people, when they first come to my channel, it's this idea of, is this person a narcissist? And kind of what the deeper question they're asking is, well, if they're a narcissist, then it's a problem. But what if they're not a narcissist? Like, but could they just be a quote unquote normal person who just lies and cheats and steals and has no empathy or remorse and who's a pathological liar? Well, either way you dice it, you lose, right? Or an authentic relationship isn't possible with either. So it's kind of the whole a rose by any other name kind of a thing. Whatever you want to call it, that kind of behavior is all relationship busting behavior. And so kind of turning inward and then figuring out why, kind of where are my standards with how I expect to be treated in a relationship? Um, and how did I get to this point? Not only where are my standards, but where is my line? Where is my line for enough is enough? When do I walk? Kind of a thing. So yeah, and it's all just part of the kind of waking up to and stepping into the awareness of every human being has the right to have boundaries. And it's okay for somebody's behavior to not be okay with you. And it's okay for you to end a relationship if it falls into one of your deal breakers. You don't have to stick around and wait for them to do something to really step over the line. You don't have to wait for a diagnosis. Are they a narcissist? You don't have to wait for a clinical diagnosis. You don't have to wait until you physically catch them cheating in order to leave. If something's not working for you now and it's not being effectively they're not doing the work of resolving that issue and in repairing the relationship, then there's your answer. That's it. That's it. So if we stick around waiting for concrete proof that something is in fact a problem, we've waited too long. Because like the gal said in the letter, experiencing perpetual confusion, crazy making, an erosion of sanity, all of that is just as much of a problem as lying, cheating, and stealing. So we don't need to wait until we catch somebody in the act of lying, cheating, and stealing if we feel that this relationship, because those are the symptoms of toxicity, right? If you feel like it's slowly killing you, then this isn't a good relationship to be in. And that's all of the proof that you need. So, okay, so let me scroll up here. Michelle says, my ex had cognitive empathy, but lacked emotional empathy. Yeah. Most people with some degree of emotional intelligence understand how something could make somebody feel, right? Most people, I would say, have cognitive empathy. Sociopaths people with sociopathic the master manipulators of the world have that cognitive empathy in spades, and they even might have a degree of empathy for certain I don't know, people or animals or what have you. It's just those that they're exploiting, they don't have empathy for, and it's that level of entitlement, it's that level of emotional detachment. So um, you know, yeah. Okay, so let me scroll up here. Clover asks, should you keep loving a narcissist by staying friends with them and being open to continuing to communicate with them? Or should you block them and cut them off cold turkey? Well, okay, so let's look at this in a couple different ways. I guess first off, um, why would you want to be friends with somebody who lacks empathy, lacks remorse, has a blinding degree of selfishness, and who does hurtful things? To me, that's not even in the zip code of what a friend is. I think it's important we get clear with the words that we're using. To me, a friendship is different than being an acquaintance with somebody. Being an acquaintance with somebody is like, somebody you work with. It's small talk, it's pleasant conversation, it's brief. There's not a lot of sharing about um, details. You're not really spending a lot of time with them at an acquaintance level. A friend is somebody that there is that level of trust and safety, comfort. There is a degree of sharing. Um, there's that emotional safety that's there with friends. So if a person has proven through their behavior that they're not an emotionally safe person, it wouldn't be a good idea to put them in the friend category. They've they were the ones that excluded themselves from that category through their behavior. So it's not like you're being mean and heartless by not, you know, allowing um, allowing them in. Their behavior has dictated that boundary. So there's that. If you, and also here the way that you phrase the question too is another great example of that black or white thinking. Should I kind of bring them into my inner circle? Right? Should I be friends with them? Should I be open to continue to communicate with them? Or should I go the exact opposite end, completely shut them out, have nothing to do with them? Well, yeah. Uh, I mean, I know what I would do, but I would encourage you to kind of think about there's also a lot of gray area in between. If there's your boundaries and standards and deal breakers will dictate where you fall in that. And I don't have the full context of their behavior, frankly, nor do I need it. This is more for you to kind of figure out what have they done in the past that that's kind of so boundary busting and so egregious that you're even considering cutting them out of your life. So if that's even a consideration, then at a minimum, some major boundaries need to be in place and the relationship needs to be taken back a few steps, quite a few steps. Whatever that looks like to you is just going to, um, depend on you. But you'll know when you've set a good boundary, when you have kind of peace return to your life and peace return to that dynamic with them. So, and what that looks like is if you decide, okay, well, I'm going to try to be not a friend, but like an acquaintance with this person. So maybe we'll talk occasionally, or maybe we'll hang out like once a month or things like that. I still had some good times with them. But I realized I can't trust them and that they're never going to be there to support me and that you know, they do whatever they do. Right. Let's say you start there with being acquaintances with them. But then every time you hang out with them, you leave feeling agitated, frustrated, irritated. You find yourself kind of rehashing the conversation, needing or wanting to talk about it repetitively. There's just kind of all of these uncomfortable feelings that are surfacing for you. When that's the case, then that's generally a sign that that boundary needs to be taken back a few steps. So if your interactions with other people are causing you such um, friction and kind of inner turmoil and irritation, then something needs to change. And it starts with us. And frankly, and it ends with us. So then we need to be able to set the boundary of, okay, well, let's say that person is your mom or somebody in your family. Let's say they want to hang out with you for 5 hours and you go over there, but man, within about 30 minutes, you're done. but you're like, oh well, I really should spend time with them. They're not getting any younger, and I just somehow need to force myself to spend time here. If it's absolutely infuriating you and it's enraging you and you're getting uh, kind of shamed and blamed and put down, and or whatever might be going on during your time there, if it's absolutely just exhausting, then regardless of that they want to spend 5 hours with you, reframing your understanding of that and being like, you know what, 45 minutes, 30 minutes is about my time, because after that, it's just absolutely not enjoyable at all. And then I stew about it for the next 3 days. So there's no relationship building that's going on uh, after that point where your level of frustration and anger has reached maximum threshold. There's no value there. So you're better off kind of spending time with a person in that zone of, oh, this is pleasant, this is enjoyable, or at a minimum, like this is with family, whatever that uh, you might need to see or want to see for however long, kind of in that window of tolerance, I guess, realizing when you're in it and then when you're outside of it, and then to start setting boundaries based on that. Michelle says, yeah, realizing I wasn't responsible for saving anyone from themselves was so freeing. Yes. And frankly, too, for those who are listening to that and that feels maybe like, oh, well, kind of lacking in compassion, or you maybe even lacking in empathy, thinking, well, my gosh, like, what am I going to do? I just going to let them drown? No, they're not going to get sober by themselves, or they're not going to, um, heal from all this childhood trauma by themselves. They need me. That kind of mindset is definitely on that more of a kind of overgiving or codependent side of the spectrum. Not only can we not fix or save somebody, it is not appropriate for us, but it's also annoying to them, because nobody really wants to be fixed or saved. And it just doesn't end well. It doesn't end well. So it's okay to have boundaries and limits with our relationships with others. Okay. Let's see. Fatima asks, can narcissists show empathy when somebody is being abused, like genuinely? And I'm not talking about the person they're victimizing. Yeah. Yeah. I really don't think that it's such a cut and dry thing with narcissists. Well, I don't know. With sociopaths, I really don't think it's such, on that side of the spectrum, I don't think it's such a cut and dry thing, that they'll have empathy for people at certain times, but then not others. They might, it's it's really kind of all over the place. Kind of like, maybe a better way to think of it is like the mafia. If you've ever watched kind of mafia movies, where they're all about loyalty, right? It's loyalty. You belong to this family, and there's this sense of, we've got to be able to do anything and everything for each other. And uh, yeah, there's very much that sense of, man, I would take a bullet for you. I'll do anything for you. Really being there for the other person until uh, until that other person um, isn't seen as useful anymore. And with some people, that level of empathy is exactly that. One of the best shows I've seen lately that did a great job of portraying this was the movie The Undoing, with Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant. Um, where he plays the role of, she's plays the role of a therapist, and he plays the role of a sociopath. They've been supposedly happily married for, I forget, I don't know, 15 years. But then it turns out he'd had several affairs on her. He was kind of doing a bunch of stuff that she didn't know about. He'd been fired from his job, and on and on. But kind of proceeding up to that, he seemed to be very empathetic and caring, but really it was all because it wasn't because he really necessarily cared. It was that his identity was so attached into kind of getting this praise and these accolades from other people. So, and that can be hard to parse out, to be like, well, what, who's actually helping other people because they really want to help versus who's helping just to get all of the praise, kind of thing. And this is why I encourage people, there's certain questions we may never know, and it's not even really important that we know. What's important is that you figure out where your line is with stuff. So, and frankly, in that movie, I should do a reaction video to that movie. In that movie, actually, the original title of the book that the movie was based on is called I Should Have Known. And so this movie was kind of exploring that concept of, here's this woman who's a therapist. She should have known that she was married to a sociopath. And I think that's very destructive, damaging thinking. That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions out there, is that that a person would somehow know, that even a therapist or somebody would know. Some people are very charming and very charismatic and really do a great job of the Bill Cosbys of the world. Some people do a really great job of hiding what they're up to. And so how would you know? Like, there's no way you would know. It has nothing to do with she wasn't a good therapist, or she needed more training or any of that. If somebody's really, really good at hiding this kind of stuff, how would you know? So what I found problematic with that movie, though, was when all of his really outrageous behavior began to surface. It came out, oh, he'd asked her father, who was very wealthy, for a six-figure loan. And it was just lying, and it was kind of taking money from her dad, and cheating, and eventually murder, and all of this stuff. That What concerned me more was her boundaries were all kinds of skewed during that. To me, that was more disturbing than the fact that she was a therapist and didn't somehow magically know that he was a sociopath before that point. So I don't know. Okay, let me let's see. Let me scroll up here. Hey, James. He says, how are you? I'm pretty good. How are you? He mentions, therapy with a toxic person isn't a good idea. Therapy by yourself will be very helpful if you can get a good one. Yes, I will say if you do decide to even remotely entertain the idea of couples counseling, um, I don't even know if I would do it to begin with, but at a minimum, I think it's worth having a session where you talk to the therapist, because here's the challenge. Okay. When you're doing individual counseling, you're only hearing events according to this person's reality and their perception of events, which is oftentimes very limited, especially if they have a lot of defense mechanisms and kind of a long string of really problematic behavior. So it can be helpful to have the other person come in, not doing therapy, but just saying, I really want to be here. I want to make sure that you see my side of the issues, and have a fuller picture of what's going on. That can really shed some light on things, because if you have a person who has this history of lying, cheating, stealing, whatnot, they can really do a good job of spinning it to this point of, oh, well, you see, I had all of this childhood abuse and I did this, and then they're making themselves the victim, and oh, I really didn't want to do this, and I just feel awful, and I just love my wife so much, and now she's going to leave, and I just don't know what I'm going to do, and blah blah blah. But if the other person gets in there and says, okay, well, there was this, 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 there was this. there's, and all of that. If you have a good therapist who's able to not get sucked into, that rescuing of, oh my goodness, this person, they're just traumatized and that's why, and kind of justifying all of this trail of destruction they've gone through, it can also kind of help the therapist to get a fuller picture of what's going on. But like I said, I wouldn't do full out therapy, but sometimes being in there and just kind of uh, making sure that all of the events are told as the full truth can be very helpful. Because what can happen is that person with all of that destructive behavior might come home and say, oh, you know what, my therapist said that uh, she said it's all due to this previous abuse and that I can change. Or she thinks you're the problem. She really thinks that you might have borderline personality disorder, or she thinks that you're manipulative, or that you should be more compassionate. Well, if you're not in the room, you don't really know what the therapist said, and you for sure don't know the the way that they presented the narrative of what happened. So yeah. And frankly, it's not reasonable to expect that a person is going to get, especially one with a lot of, uh, somebody that has a long-standing pattern of behavior that shows that they are uncomfortable with the truth. Okay. If a person's lying, cheating, stealing, that's living a life of deception. That's living a life in the shadows. When a person has a bunch of behavior like that, they're not comfortable with the truth. And if they're not comfortable with the truth, then they've been using a lot of their different defense mechanisms in order to do the mental gymnastics necessary to make themselves okay with the behavior that they're doing. So to all of a sudden expect them, oh, they're going to go to therapy and then they're going to be completely honest and tell the story of events through your perspective is, it doesn't go down that way. It really doesn't go down that way unless they're so manipulative and so insightful that that they're able to kind of walk that line. But frankly, I think that tends to be few and far between. So, okay, well, let me scroll up. Let's see. Gwen asks, how do I ask a question? You can just ask a question in the chat and I will try to see it. Sometimes Jack and Huffle Mom, the two moderators that are in the chat tonight, normally do a really great job of kind of finding the questions that I'm not able to see or answer and to get my attention. You can also tag me, what is it, @ and then Thrive After Abuse, and then your question, and that'll put that in orange so I can see it as well. Okay. Okay. Jack says, okay, I don't have the username because this person asked a question after Angie and I closed out our live stream yesterday, but this person had asked, what if your abuser is in jail? And I guess my response to that would be, okay, well then, what is the question? Is it, yeah, like what if he is in jail or she? Is the deeper question there of how do I have boundaries with them, or how do I, yeah, I guess I don't know. I do know what I do know, okay, is that a lot of people, when they have an abusive person in their life, abusive or exploitative, which exploitative is abusive, but uh, if they have an abusive or manipulative, exploitative person in their life who does go to jail, there can be these feelings of obligation. Oh my gosh, this person's in jail. that jail is scary. They're going to need money. I feel like I should support them. I should be there to listen. Uh, and if they're manipulative, they can do a great job of either blaming you for somehow putting them in jail, or saying things like, "Oh, I can't believe what I'm in jail. You're just going to leave me here. You're just going to let me suffer. What, you really, you can't even pick up the phone to talk to me? Wow, you're such a bitch. I can't even believe that I ever considered dating you. Blah, blah, blah. You're cold, you're heartless, you're this." But I hope you can see that that's an inappropriate expectation, one, and very, very manipulative, two. So you don't owe anybody time, money, energy, any of that, especially somebody who's been abusive to you. You owe yourself boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. First and foremost, always, all the time. So even if somebody's in jail and they're having a hard time and they want to call you and they want to talk and all of that, you don't need to be their therapist. You don't need to be their support system. You don't need to be all of that. And frankly, if they've been abusive to you, they need to go find somebody else, because if their behavior, um, let's say they were abusive, they went to jail, but they're blaming you, which is very common because they have such a huge sense of entitlement and they don't understand. Well, they do understand, but there's not um, it's very immature. It's sort of, they feel that their very reactive behavior is due to everybody else. It's the whole, well, look at what you made me do, right? You forgot to buy bread at the store. I lashed out, get all upset, and start becoming, physically or verbally aggressive. Let's say the neighbors call the police and then the police take them away. And it's this thing like, oh, I can't believe this. You're making me look bad. Um, you did this. If you hadn't forgotten to buy bread, I wouldn't be in jail. So you owe me. You owe me a phone call. You need to send me money. I can't believe it. If you don't do this, when I get out, I'm going to cheat on you, or I'm just going to go find somebody else who knows how to love me, or I'm not going to pay child support, or I'm going to go for a divorce and you'll never see your kids again. There's no shortage of things that angry, manipulative, entitled, emotionally immature people say and do. But that still does not mean that you owe them anything, not a damn thing. So, boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. There is no reasoning with a person with that kind of behavior. There really isn't. Their mindset is so deeply dysfunctional that the issue here, because a lot of people will think, well, I just need to explain to them. I just need to explain to them. No, it was, you started yelling at me and shoving me, and that's why you went to jail. Like, it's not me. Even if you called the cops, it's not me that put you to jail. It's your behavior that put you to jail. There is no, when a person is not responsible for their actions, they're lacking an appropriate adult level of accountability. And so trying to explain to an adult the basics of adult behavior really just goes to show there's a lot more going on there, that they've missed uh, major emotional development milestones for whatever reason. But again, it's not up to you to fix them. And I would strongly encourage that you don't, because the needle doesn't move very far anyhow. It especially doesn't move very far if it's their partner or a family member that's trying to fix them. The only way to work with that behavior is oftentimes boundaries and consequences. So let's see. Potter Rosa says, I left my narcissist, but I still struggle with self-critical thoughts of how and why did I allow so much to happen? Why I didn't catch the red flags earlier and leave sooner, etc. Any advice? So this is very common. And when that fog of confusion lifts, when we're out of that, really, and generally, when that fog of confusion lifts, it's at the very tail end of the relationship. or it's when the relationship's over. Either way, at either points in our relationship with them, we've had enough. And when we've had enough, it's because there's been such a buildup of such boundary busting behavior that it gets to a point where we can no longer justify it, minimize it, deny it, excuse it, any of that. We're like, this is ridiculous. And it's sort of like just that bubble of minimization and denial, it just pops. And then we start realizing, hey, you know what? Oh my God. We look back with the clarity that only hindsight has to offer. Right. They lied about this, they cheated with that, they did this, they did that, they did this. And we start seeing things so much clearer. And that can be, and it's a very difficult thing to wrap your mind around of how did I get here? How did I get to this place? And anyone in any type of problematic situation gets, if they ever get out of it, they have exactly what you're describing. When a person leaves a cult, they have that. How did I get here? How did I somehow join a cult, live in it for 10 years and not realize that it was a cult? That's a very disjointed feeling to have. So one of the ways when you have those thoughts come up, it can help to to give yourself kind of the grace and compassion of realizing that you did the best you could at the time, and that's all any of us can do. But I think it's important to not just stop there. A lot of people who get out of abusive relationships, myself included, tend to think, oh, it was a fluke. Just like, okay, you get into one cult, it's a fluke. And you get into two or more cults, okay, there's something more going on here. And frankly, the fact that we even got into one cult, there's something more going on there, but it can be difficult to see. So, uh, so, so kind of giving yourself grace and compassion, but then also doing what you're doing, coming to live streams like this, asking questions, learning about manipulative tactics, and more importantly, learning about getting grounded within yourself, boundary standards, deal breakers, um, effective communication, manipulative communication. This kind of stuff's not taught. And it's not, no matter what people say, it's not intuitive. It really isn't. Even if you grow up in the most Norman Rockwell kind of wholesome family environments where, everybody, what is it? Kind of Lake Wobegon, if you're an NPR fan, where all of the children are above average kind of a thing, where everybody's just beautiful and perfect and everything's wonderful. Even in those environments, if these skills aren't taught, it only takes one misunderstanding to really trip up a person. So it's also kind of one thing too, kind of talking about the difference between, like cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. There's a cognitive understanding to manipulation and abuse, and then there's an emotional understanding to manipulation and abuse. We all think that we'd be able to spot a manipulative or abusive person. The vast majority of the time we would be wrong because it's easy, although apparently it's not so easy. It's easier to see the wolves in wolves' clothing. It's harder to see the wolf in sheep's clothing. So if all of the bad people of the world looked and acted like Charles Manson, things would be a lot easier, but they don't. You have the Bill Cosbys of the world, you have the Ted Bundys of the world, you have the very kind of charming, charismatic, the what's his name, Epstein, these kinds of people of the world. And there's no shortage of them. And because there's this mismatch between what we think a dangerous person looks like or how they act and how a dangerous person can look or act, that's how these things happen. Another example of this is, for a long time, if you grew up in the 80s like I did, there was a big push of kind of stranger danger. kind of things. Educate your kids. Don't take candy from strangers. Okay, that's great. But what if that person doesn't have candy? What if they have a puppy? Or what if that person isn't a stranger, but they're a family member or a member of your church or a teacher? And what if it's not some creepy guy in a van, but what if it's a female teacher? Or what if it's your mom? So there's lots of kind of hidden biases that we all have about who can be dangerous. And um, and also in part because of this, because dangerous people can come and do come in all shapes and sizes, ages, genders, nationalities, culture backgrounds, religions, you name it, it would take a long time to try to learn every single thing about every single way that a damaging person could come across. The good news is you don't have to do all that. All you have to do is turn inward and figure out what is comfortable and uncomfortable for you. And if you get grounded in that, then that's your line. So, and it's so freeing making that shift, because then it's no longer about trying to figure out, well, are they acting this way because of their childhood, or because they had a bad day or a bad week, or because of drugs, or because of I caused them to be frustrated. Are they acting, what are their intentions? Are their intentions to hurt me? I don't want to overreact. And one of the biggest gifts that you can give yourself is just realizing you don't need to know all of that. It doesn't matter. It truly does not matter. If somebody, uh, for example, I was watching a vlogger today, and she was talking about she was going into this studio in California, and there was a really sketchy guy outside. And she was having trouble with her keys and couldn't get into the building fast enough and was having a lot of anxiety. And she got in and very much kind of discounted the sketchiness of the guy and was attributing it to just kind of her own anxiety. The reality is we don't need to know what that guy's intentions were. Was it to harm her? Was it to steal from her? It doesn't matter. And if she were to have waited around thinking, well, I don't want to be rude, or I don't want him to feel bad, or I don't want to hurt his feelings, all of that stuff. If the only proof that we have that a person is dangerous is for them to actually do harm to us, then we've waited for too long. If a situation makes you uncomfortable, it's okay to take proactive action about it. If somebody's following me in a parking lot and or in a hallway even, and they're uncomfortably close, if I don't like it, I do something. I stop, I back up, I turn around, whatever. I might not even have the feeling of, oh, are they going to harm me? It might simply be, man, they're stressing me out. Like they're walking really fast behind me. I'm not in a hurry. I don't want this. Like right now, I don't need this. Then I adjust my behavior accordingly. So it's the same thing with relationships. If somebody does something that you're not comfortable with, uh, you either take action. You take action in some way, shape, or form, either depending on what it is. Uh, um, if they cross a boundary, and depending on the degree of the boundary, if it's mild, then maybe asserting yourself. If it's more major, then maybe that's a deal breaker. I was reading a post today. In fact, a woman was saying that she had gone on a first date with a guy, had showed up, and the guy made a comment to her about she needed to go to the bathroom and fix herself up, and then could come back to the table, and was kind of wanting feedback about that. Like, to me, that would be instant deal breaker. If anybody was telling me what I needed to do, and it's boundary crossing, it's not appropriate. And to me, that shows uh, such controlling and problematic behavior, like that's the tip of the iceberg. We're done. We're done. I mean, it's just so over the line that, like that's a preview of a lot more to follow, and it's only going to get worse. So if a person can't even pull it together and act decent on the first date with respect and appropriate conversation, and not come across as a controlling a-hole, then like there's no hope. So so I guess the point being kind of understanding where your boundaries are, when they're crossed, and then what to do about it, and realizing that nobody else has to agree with you. I'll give you another quick example. A friend of mine went on a date recently, and a seemingly nice guy. She's not a drinker. She's a super health nut. This guy, I think, had 4 or 5 drinks, and for her, that was it. She was done. She's like, right away, lifestyle's incompatible. Didn't mean that he was an alcoholic. Didn't mean that he had a drinking problem. Didn't mean that anything other than she knew right away we're not on the same page with lifestyle, and that was it. So it's everybody has different deal breakers. And I will okay, one more thing with this. I will tell you, a lot of people, their response to everything that I'm saying tends to be like, but there's no perfect person. And well, what if I'm missing out on this amazing person? And they have so many things that are good with them. I will tell you, when you start settling, especially when you're compromising about respect and you're compromising your boundaries and your standards and your deal breakers, that relationship's over. It's done right there. It's dead in the water. So it's such a false hope that we can have, thinking, well, I just need to be more tolerant. I need to really give this person a chance. I need to somehow be more reasonable, or whatever. But the reality is, even on things that are more on that mild end, like lifestyle, if that's a deal breaker, if it's a radically different lifestyle, if you're a fitness buff and the other person's a couch potato, that might be all you need. So getting into that relationship thinking, well, I'm going to somehow try to make this work for me. Maybe I can get them to change. I can try to get them into the gym and introduce them to fitness and all this. That's a project. Do you want a project, or do you want a partner? And, so just some things to think about. So, okay. Let me scroll here. Lori says, nobody tells me what to do. I see that as emotional abuse. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's very controlling. You're not a child. And, you're an adult. You're an autonomous person who has, the right to your own decisions, to your own, wants, needs, thoughts, feelings, all of that. How you dress, how you act, what kind of job you have, what kind of friends you have, all of that. If that's not okay with the other person, then, anybody can speak up, but it doesn't mean that you actually have to start changing yourself in order for them to be okay with it. So, okay, let me scroll here. Scrolling. Very true. Nick says, your anger is one of the weapons the narcissist uses against you flawlessly. Yes, they absolutely can. They provoke, or it's just a bunch of, you're banging your head against a wall trying to get the full truth out of them, or God, even half truth, or to get them to see the error, their illogical behavior in some way, shape, or form. Like, this is a problem. This is a problem. How do you not see that this is a problem? And you're trying to explain, again, the basics of adult behavior. Um, and of course, trying to have a solutions-oriented conversation with somebody who has um, no effective communication skills or isn't currently using them, who is highly manipulative, who will not accept any accountability for their own behavior, that will eventually erupt in anger because it's infuriating to just get nowhere and a person's just throwing out a bunch of nonsense and they keep either kind of moving the goalpost or they're continuing to shift blame. You bring up one thing, wow, well, who's this I don't know, there's $10,000 missing from our bank account. Why did you take out that money? Or maybe not even that extreme. There, who is this other person texting you? Or what is this, right? Like, what is this strange thing that you're up to? And then they shift it around. I can't believe you looked in my phone. I can't trust you at all. And now, boom, now the focus of the conversation has been shifted to you. And then you find yourself kind of defending, um, you know, defending how you found out about their kind of amoral behavior. Um, and then trying to get the subject back on track of, okay, no, let's focus. We can talk all about whatever you want to talk about, but I want to resolve this one issue. So refusing to let them drag off the topic. But that's again, that stuff's exhausting. And effective communication is a vital skill in a relationship. Frankly, there does come a point, I think, when you get so into like really learning about boundaries, standards, deal breakers, emotional maturity, effective communication, that it becomes such a sexy trait in another person that it kind of overrides, because it's so rare, it overrides a lot. It carries a person really, really far. So it changes the way that you interact with people. It changes the way that you view people. When you go on a date or two and then you start realizing, oh my gosh, this person, no, they don't have this. Like they don't have these skills, or um, it's kind of all games that they're wanting to play or whatever it is. Uh, it just, I think for probably a lot of people in our community, it just kind of leaves you feeling like, oh man, I can't believe I went from being really attracted to this person to done, like walk away. There's nothing there for me, kind of thing. It's so unattractive to see emotional uh, immaturity surface in another person, especially when it's paired with ineffective communication. And um, you know, so all of, I guess, to when you first um, so when down the road, when you're able to kind of better separate detaching emotionally from abusive people, and you're starting to make that shift to seeing their abusive behavior as a reflection of them, it's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of them. When you're able to start separating kind of who owns what in terms of behavior and responsibility and accountability and all of that, it's a lot easier to kind of just see how kind of icky and um, unworkable that behavior really is. So, okay, let me scroll down here. Yep. Nick says maturity requires self-intensive self-reflection. Acknowledge it, then build up. Yes. And again, too, there's that difference between um, kind of this cognitive understanding of it, because this is really weird. And I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys have seen this too. There are quite a few other people out there that are self-help gurus or whatever you might call it, that can really talk a good game. They can talk all about, uh, um, you know, they have that cognitive understanding of kind of what a healthy relationship is. Bill Cosby, I think, is a great example of this. He wrote multiple books on how to have a healthy marriage, how to communicate effectively with your spouse, all kinds of stuff. He knew it. He just didn't live it. And so that can take some time. And that it can be very, very confusing to try to piece that out. Adjourn says, I do not want my extremely abusive past to ruin my future. Are you talking about in terms of you being abusive, or are you being abused? So while you're answering that question, Adjourn, I'm gonna jump to Haley's question here. Haley says, my ex has supervised visitation and he only wants to see the kids when he can force me to be there. How can I stop this from happening? Uh, you need to call. Well, I guess you would need to check what your the agreement says as far as supervised visits and who's there. Like, where do you who is supervising your child, and kind of what are his supposed reasons for wanting you to be there? So if he's saying something along the lines of, "Oh, well, I want you to be there because I'm afraid that you're going to sue me again, saying that I'm abusing my child. I just want you to know for certain that I'm not abusing our child." Then you could say, "Okay, if that's his supposed concern, then okay, then we'll have this filmed by the supervising person." So, um, but again, check your the kind of the divorce agreement and the parenting plan. If and frankly, even if it did say that you need to be there for supervised visits, if if this is occurring, then it's time to call an attorney and get that revised and say, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't want to be there. I feel like this is a form of whatever it might be, control, manipulation. And a way for him to kind of make me uncomfortable. He's saying it's for these reasons. I feel like it's for these reasons. I don't really care what his motives are. All I know is I'm not comfortable being there. How do we make this happen to where I'm not there? And then work backwards from that, because that's your boundary. Okay. So if the order reads that your visitation is supervised by you or your designee, then you find a designee. Frankly, it doesn't, you know, he can have a preference of you being there or not, but he can't dictate it. It's not up to him. So he either has visitation with your child while the designee is there, or I guess he doesn't see your child. It's that simple. He doesn't get to dictate the terms on which, who's doing the supervising. So, and he might, and just kind of to forewarn you, he might start throwing that at you. Well, if you're not there, then I guess I'm just not going to see our daughter or our son. Right. I'm not going to see them if you're not there. I don't know who this designee is. I don't know who this person. And what if they do this? And what if they do that? And what if they say that I'm being abusive or whatever? And then offer up, well, you know what? They could always video the visitation. I'm fine with that too, if that would make you feel better. Kind of a thing. But I can't be there anymore. And however you want to phrase that. So okay. Yeah, Haley says, yeah, that's how he does it. Yeah, that's how they normally do. So again, kind of detaching emotionally from that, seeing the manipulative behavior for what it is, realizing that you're not hurting your child by not being there. If he's refusing to see your child because you're not there, he's the one that's hurting your child. He's the one that's hurting himself. That's on him. That's not on you. We all make decisions. That's what the decree says. Visitation is by you or by somebody else, whoever you designate. you don't want to be there for whatever reason, then the designee will be there. He either abides by that or he doesn't see your child. It's his decision. But you don't have to negotiate with that. If there's a history there of abuse, manipulation, which I'm guessing that there is, then you don't need to subject yourself to to kind of giving into that power play on his end of um, kind of being around his presence and uh, being so profoundly on guard and uneasy the whole time, and allowing him to uh, kind of feeding into this power play. So yeah, and thank you for that, Darlene. She says, yeah, and there's also places that will supervise and are professionals. Yeah, there's a lot of places, especially these days, who um, who really have built a whole business around kind of that third party level of negotiation, communication, supervision, all of that. So if you have an attorney or um, even kind of doing a deep dive Google search, that that would be a place to start of kind of who could be a trusted designee if you don't know anybody. Could there be some sort of court appointed person, or you name it. So let's see. Okay, adjourn. Let me scroll up and see if you had answered. This cha. Adjourn. Is saying, I wish I could forget a lot of things. I'm in a new relationship and I'm still afraid because of my abusive past. Okay. And Adjourn, did you answer the question of in terms of your abusive past, were you abusive or were you the one being abused? Or was it both? And I think I need to get my vision checked. Like this. I wonder if I can enlarge the font on the chat. I don't know if it's just long day or what, but my goodness, my eyes. Uh, well, okay, let me go ahead. I'll just answer your question in a kind of a general way and tell you if and when you answer. In terms of, we'll just, again, we're going to kind of generalize it. In terms of fearing that past behavior or past relationships are going to now interfere with current relationships, the biggest and probably the only way to really, or at least one of the only ways to really prevent that from happening, is to kind of comb through lessons learned and the skill set. So, and it's going to be a little different depending on which side of the coin you were on, if you were being abused or if you were being abusive. So if you were, although I will say either way, being in very volatile situations or having a very reactive approach to relationships, either if you're being abused or being abusive. And it's not uncommon for people who have been abused to then go on and become abusive. Uh, when you're around a lot of dysfunction in your life, that kind of sets the stage for how we cope, how we handle frustration and anger, how we interact with others, kind of our subconscious templates for what a relationship is, as well as what commitment and marriage and friendship and obligation and all of these things look like in motion. As I say time and time again, the skills of how to relate effectively and appropriately to other people, the skills needed to have a happy, healthy, well-adjusted relationship with ourselves and with other people, they're not taught to the level that they need to be. And uh, it would be wonderful if all of these skills started in like kindergarten, which they can be. They're just, and I think that's coming down the pipeline. But most of us didn't grow up with that. We might have gotten a few great messages here and there, but it's not anywhere as encompassing as it needed to be. So with that said, I think everybody, everybody, myself included, uh, there needs to be this process of self-examination and self-reflection and kind of going through figuring out, okay, well, what kind of um, messages, positive or negative, did I pick up? And actually, I would especially encourage you to not label them as positive or negative, because that's another way that problems fly under the radar is we think certain things are positive when they're actually, if they're not in that context of boundaries, standards, and deal breakers, they're actually negative, but we think they're positive. So don't even don't even label them that way. I would just kind of do an exercise of writing down what are some of the messages that you received about commitment, about friendship, about love. What is effective communication? What is ineffective communication? How can you tell which is being used at the time? Doing some reading about defense mechanisms. It's really interesting stuff, frankly. It's how our brain kind of more often than not subconsciously responds to stress. Figuring this stuff out about ourselves is game changing. So kind of doing some self-reflection. How do you handle stress? How do you handle frustration? Um, kind of what um, if any kind of negative core beliefs or problematic or disempowering messages do kind of jump to your mind of, oh, well, I learned that, I don't know, at a young age that I wasn't worthy of love, or that I was unlovable, or that I um, was stupid, or I wouldn't amount to much, or whatever it might be. If you can, some people who had a very kind of difficult, demanding, berating, manipulative parent, or more than parent or parents or siblings or you name it, can more often than not give kind of name a lot of the disempowering messages that they grew up with. So the more you can get clarity on that, the better off you are. It's sort of like kind of, it's like finding the edge pieces of a puzzle, right? Like when you start trying to put a puzzle together, what do? Normally, you look for the pieces that have the straight line on one side. Ideally, they'll have straight lines on two sides, right? Those are gold. So then you kind of have an idea of, okay, this is the size of the puzzle I'm looking at. And you have an idea of, okay, well, this is a puzzle of, an orange kitten and sitting on grass with a blue sky. You can kind of tell, okay, well, the blue pieces are going to go up here, and then the orange pieces are going to go in the middle, and then the green pieces are going to go at the bottom. And you start getting a concept of the puzzle, what it looks like, and where the pieces are going to start to fit in. That helps tremendously. So taking time for self-examination is vital, because healthy relationships aren't something that we just kind of blindly fall into. They're created, and they're created moment by moment, um, with effective communication and with boundaries. So if two people are being authentic, if they're I know, and that sounds so kind of buzzwordy, but if two people are um, being themselves, and they're comfortable, they're okay, kind of wants, needs, thoughts, feelings, opinions, all of this, and they're in tune with that. And when you have two people that are both that way, then disagreements and boundaries and stuff are going to be crossed. Hopefully not to like an egregious level or anywhere near that, but they will be crossed. Differences are going to come up. You say that you prefer the keto diet. Well, they prefer high carb. You're a Republican, they're a Democrat. You're, I don't know, Catholic, they're Jewish. Do you see what I'm saying? Like differences on a weekend, you would love nothing more than to go on a 10-mile hike. They would love nothing more than to sleep in. It's figuring out what makes you you, and in large part, and then also when conversations and when um, kind of daily life happens, how is that negotiated? So um, lack of conflict, lack of confrontation isn't a sign of a healthy relationship. It's a sign of poor communication with ourselves and with the other person. So there's a lot there, and it can be kind of overwhelming at first to start learning all of these skills, and it's kind of a new way of being. Um, and this is why too I really encourage people to find. We're not looking for like the perfect partner or like the perfect friend or whatever, but somebody that has a kind of a workable degree of emotional maturity, who can self-soothe, who understands kind of appropriate accountability, where they start and end, where you start and end. That's important, and because if that's not there, then their understanding of boundaries isn't going to be there. So understanding when your boundaries or their boundaries are crossed, and then bringing it up tactfully and respectfully, and then doing the work of um, like I'm obviously kind of figuring out, is this an appropriate boundary, right? So if it is an appropriate boundary and it's something that you're willing to negotiate on, or whatever it might be, then that's the work of a relationship. Then it's kind of figuring out, okay, where is the compromise, and um, you know kind of working together as a team. A relationship is probably best thought of in many ways. It's a three-legged race. And if there's differences about where you're going, how fast you're going to be running, um, the strategy that you have, it, if that's not there, then it's not going to work. One person is going to be dragging the other person, and that only works for so long before that person wears themselves out. So, uh, yeah, just some things to consider. Okay, so let me scroll up here. Mhm. Sydney says, if somebody doesn't say thank you, do you just silently set a boundary and not talk to them, or confront them about it? I guess I would need some more context. Generally, I would, and it depends on the person, it depends on the situation, that kind of thing. Uh, if it really, it largely, not kind of, it largely depends. If I give somebody, if I do something for somebody, and if they don't say thank you, then uh, it's hard. So if I get somebody a gift and they don't say thank you, or if I cook them a meal and they don't say thank you, and again, it kind of depends on the person and the situation. I kind of might file it in my memory bank. Like if it was my brother, for example, and I were to, I don't know, do something, cook him dinner, or I don't know, clean out his car or something like that. Um, but even then, I guess if he didn't ask, if he didn't ask, if I just took it upon myself to do something like that, I wouldn't expect. It's nice to get a thank you or to have some sort of appreciation, but I guess it really wouldn't be expected, um, because I'm the one that's taking it upon myself to do the action. So, um, I guess if it bothers you, um, yeah, it just depends. It kind of depends on context. Like I'm thinking about uh, an ongoing. It's kind of been resolved now, but an ongoing issue my mom and I had for years was whenever she would get me a gift, she would expect me to write her a thank you card because that's how she was raised, that you write thank you cards. I don't like writing thank you cards. I prefer to tell a person in person or over the phone, thank you. I'm not a big fan of um, kind of creating unnecessary paper waste. It's not even that I have it. It just seems so unnecessary. Like I just saw you. I told you thank you to your face. We had a lovely time. Why on earth would I then follow that up with a card? Like that seems kind of redundant and um, just unnecessary. And my mom and her view, what I was being rude because I wasn't sending a thank you card. This was a power struggle for a long, long time. And I finally told her, I said, here's the deal. I'm not going to send you a damn card. I'm not. I will tell you on the phone or in person, thank you. You know that I appreciate these gifts. If it's that big of a thing for you, then stop sending me gifts. But this is, it feels, I'm feeling controlled. I don't like it. So I don't think that expectation should follow gifts. If I'm not receiving the gift in a way that works for you, then don't send the gift. So what we do now is she still, and I've asked her multiple times, and please do not send me thank you cards. A thank you over the phone, acknowledgement of it, or when I see you in person, that's enough. I don't like all of the paper waste. It's unnecessary. Um, but she still sends me cards. So I can't control her, you know, but I can control myself. And I had to set my boundary with that and explain why. And, you know, kind of put her feelings, let her own her feelings. So, if she felt that I was rude, if she thought that it was inconsiderate or whatnot, well, okay, that's on you. I'm not going to own that. I'm not going to own that. I've told you my reasons as to why I have an issue with this. If you're not okay with that, if you don't think those are valid reasons, then don't send the gift. That's it. So I don't know. It depends. If I were to do, I don't know. I would need more context. Okay. This is okay, some more context. Sydney says, okay, well, how about after a favor? So if somebody does you a favor, you say, hey, can you pick up, I don't know, um, uh, some bread at the store, right? For me. If they say, can you pick up some bread at the store? You go drop the bread off and they don't acknowledge it. Um, yeah, I think definitely falls under the umbrella of, kind of rude. I don't think there's anything wrong with, and I would encourage you to assert yourself. So if you're like, hey, and it's up to you how you do it. It's going to depend on your dynamic with that person. Is this an event or is it a pattern where they continually don't acknowledge the things that you're doing? You could say you could do it kind of jokingly, like, hey, where's my thank you? Or you could just say, hey, you know what? I did you a favor. It'd be nice to get a thank you. And kind of go from there. If it's a pattern of behavior and it really bothers you, then it's going to be up to you to kind of figure out, okay, well then, um, if your line is, I would like to get a thank you after, after I do things for this person, I do things for them, they don't say thank you, well then you stop doing things for them. And that's okay. That's your line. So, okay, let's see. But, I do want to touch on something too, and this is kind of I don't know, maybe a segue into a bigger conversation, but the um, kind of like if somebody crosses a boundary with us and kind of how do we handle it, or or do we just walk away? Kind of knowing when to walk away. One of the things that I've seen time and again, and one of the things that I've experienced myself time and again after kind of being on this journey towards healing has been kind of navigating that middle ground. It can be a little challenging. And in part, I think it can be that fear of um, getting kind of getting tangled up with an abusive or manipulative person and thinking, okay, this is a red flag, done, I'm done, early on, done. The result can be kind of a very lonely existence. And I'm not saying by any stretch to keep, manipulative or abusive people in our life, but there is behavior that's kind of before that manipulative or abusive, that is that boundary cross, that may be intentional or unintentional. It may be um, it's more on the kind of the benign side of things, where maybe a conversation would resolve the issue. So in situations like that, where you're doing them a favor, they never say thank you, that would be a good example of, okay, and again, I don't know full context, so there could be a lot of other stuff going on that, you know, that's the tip of the iceberg, but then they've done a lot of other things that are just 10 times worse. I don't know. So take that into consideration. But if somebody does something that's not okay with you and they cross the line, learning those skills of effective communication. So that's also part of boundary setting. It's a big part of boundary setting, of speaking up when a boundary's been crossed. This isn't to say that um, their response will always be what you hope it will be. I think oftentimes it's not. We all can be very defensive when um, when somebody has an issue with us. That's, I think, in part, that's just human nature. We know our kind of motives, or why we did what we did or didn't do, and it just causes defensiveness when somebody asks us to do something different. So being able to kind of handle that defensiveness and uh, appropriately, and not go on the attack, and not engage in that, oh, but look what you did this one time, or you didn't tell me thank you that time I did this for you, or you didn't. All of that, that's just that's ineffective communication. It's really dragging the conversation off topic, kind of a thing. That's, to me, that's a bigger problem. How somebody handles the problem, whoever has the problem, you or them, how that problem is handled is oftentimes more telling than just the problem itself. It's how it's being handled that really is the deeper issue. So, um, and it takes time and practice, learning how to assert ourselves kind of tactfully, and to not feel, um, well, or to handle, I should say, handle feelings of anxiety about being assertive, how to handle them as as well as we can, and how to kind of detach from the outcome, realizing that we're not responsible for um, how the other person feels about it. If we have a boundary and we're asserting it tactfully, and the other person does not handle it well, then that's on them. All any of us can do is to mention when our boundaries are crossed. It's up to the other person to decide if uh, they want to respect that boundary. Some people will, some people won't, you know, and then that tells you kind of who your people are. Okay. Oh, I like that. Embers says, I have such clear boundaries and expectations of respect that I've decided not to date anyone that is not clearly a friend. Yes. This, what you're saying, I think is a great example of when kind of that old platitude that we've probably all heard of, um, kind of, oh, marry your best friend kind of a thing. There's a lot of validity to that. This person doesn't necessarily have to be your best friend, but uh, I would say at that level, best friend material. You can have more than one best friend, but they need to be up there. They need to be a best friend. Not necessarily the only one, but at least one of them. Because it, there needs to be, you have to like the person if you're going to have a relationship that works. If you don't like them, if there's not common interests or kind of the ability to communicate effectively, if there's not that connection, that level of chemistry, um, being able, I don't, just to enjoy each other's company and um, all of that, then kind of why are you marrying them? So it really does, it does help. And I think that's a great way to go about it, of seeing if you have kind of moving people slowly through the different circles into like your very, very innermost circle. So kind of on the outer rings, you have, well, at first you have total strangers, right? Actually, that's not true. You have the very outermost ring, you have total strangers, but outside of that ring, you would then have people that have hurt you before. So, total strangers, there's that sense of neutrality. I don't know who they are. I don't trust them. I don't not trust them. I don't know. I don't have enough information to go off of anything other than I don't know them. They're a stranger. If the person has proven themselves, or yeah, especially if they've proven themselves to be dangerous or destructive in any way, shape, or form to you or anybody else, then it would be good to have, they need to go in a circle that's even farther out than strangers. Because this person has proven themselves to be harmful, you need to have even more distance from them than you do a total stranger. Then the next circle in would be probably acquaintances, right? Like kind of work buddies, maybe some neighbors that you wave at, people maybe that you volunteer with, people you're not sharing kind of deeply personal things about your life. Conversations are brief, they're pleasant, they're polite. Um, Maybe they know a little bit about you, you know a little bit about them, but not, they don't know things about you of any um, kind of significant emotional depth, let's say. And then you start moving inwards towards, uh, let's say, friends. You know, these are people that you enjoy hanging out with. There's that degree of emotional comfort that's been established. There's a connection there. There's, likability. Everybody's enjoying each other's company. They've proven themselves to be trustworthy. You are relying on them. They're relying on you. There's this basis of mutuality, of generally emotional support. If you've got a problem, you've had a hard day, um, you want to call and celebrate a victory, that they would be somebody that you would call for that. And then you move into kind of, very, very, very inner circle of spouse or, um, well, maybe best friend and then spouse kind of a thing. So best friend, you're sharing all kinds. They know your innermost secrets. They know your deepest vulnerabilities. They know things that you've probably never told anybody else before, kind of a thing. But then your spouse ideally is in that very innermost circle where they're the kind of best, they're at that best friend level of knowledge about you, and there's that level of emotional trust there. And then there's also sexual intimacy. So there's intimacy in all areas. Yeah. So yeah, it helps to go about that. We don't tend to, well, at least at first, because again, these skills really aren't taught. Dating tends to be something that we all just kind of age into. Parents are like, okay, well, I guess, I don't know, you're 15 or you're 18 or whatever. Now you can start dating. But there's not a lot of direction given. And that's a shame. And that's a problem. So, uh, so what it will, we all kind of do the best we know how. And it's sort of like, okay, well, this person, I don't know, whatever attracts us to them. They're funny or they're smart or they're good looking or um, whatever. Those traits are great, but they're nowhere near uh, comprehensive enough to actually make for a solid relationship that's going to last. Okay, so let's see here. Oh, let me scroll up here. Yes. Okay. Jack mentioned book club. Thank you for bringing this up. He says, talking to Michelle, he says, we were reading him and Hufflemom, which they're moderators on this channel. And they're also a married couple, for those of you that don't know. And yeah, they're two amazing people who have been through a lot on individual levels and a lot as a couple. And yes, so we all just kind of think the world of them. But anyway, it's okay. So Jack's saying, yes, Mom and him were reading self-help books together for years. So we were prepped for Dana's book club, which we hope will return soon. Yes, we will be having book club the last Thursday of this month. So the book that we will be discussing, and I think this is the book we left off on, it's the Stop Walking on Eggshells book. So I will work towards getting that information. Let me just look real quick here. Hold on, and I will tell you who the author of it is. Paul Mason and Randy Krieger are the authors. It's called Stop Walking on Eggshells, Taking Your Life Back When Someone You Care About Has Borderline Personality Disorder. So it's an interesting book. This is my second time through this book, and I think it'll make for a good discussion. There's, I don't know. I guess like with every book, right? There's points that really resonate, and then there's kind of some points of concern. I do know that there's also multiple editions of this book, and I think, in all fairness, I think the one that I'm reading is possibly the first edition. So I'll be kind of curious to see what all they've updated with it, because there are quite, well, not quite a few, but there are a few things in there I don't agree with and that I do think are worth addressing. But yes, that'll be the last Thursday of this month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My guess is it'll be just me. So we'll discuss it and we'll go from there. Okay. So let me scroll up here. Magalodoro asks, in terms of setting a boundary, he says, why use tact? I'm so much better with being blunt. The reason tact is important when setting a boundary is because when connection isn't present, any type of like correction tends to feel very attacking. So, and it depends on your dynamic with the other person. So if they're, some people are more comfortable, and again, I think it depends on what we're talking about in terms of blunt behavior. Some people are more forthcoming. And I'm not saying, when I was talking about using tact, I'm not talking about you need to just drench it in sugar before you say it. I um, Tactfulness when it comes to assertiveness, it's a clear, directive uh, statement. It's not a conversation that goes on and on where you're circling around the point you're trying to make. It's not um, asking the person for permission. It's not tiptoeing on things. It's not getting defensive and losing your temper. It's stating um, it's stating whatever happened isn't okay with you. So, and it'll run the gamut. So, uh, assertiveness it also doesn't involve needing to make anybody else feel less than or tearing them down. So let's say, for example, um, you have a friend and they're always late, and that really bothers you because you're the kind of person who likes to be early to things. So let's say you guys are going to see, a movie, and um, and yet again, you say, hey, the movie's at 5 o'clock, and they show up at your house, at 4:55, and it's very clear, well, the movie starts at 5, we're never going to get there on time, kind of a thing. To say to them something like, um, you know, I really enjoy your company. I really like going to see movies with you, but I don't like running late. And uh, I really don't like running late. And, um, could you try to be here like a good, however, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes early so we can get to the movie theater early enough to where we're not rushed to get popcorn and, tickets and all of that. So we can be in the seats for the previews because I really like to watch the previews. It's up to them to say if that's okay with them or not. If that's not, or if they say, "Oh, yeah, 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 absolutely. I'll yeah, next time I'll be there 30 minutes early. We'll get there in plenty of time." And next time they do the exact same thing. They get there uh basically late, right? So then I would encourage you to bring it up again. And but then it's very clear of, okay, I need to somehow figure something out because this isn't working. So if if the goal is for you to get to the movie theater, watch the movie, um, be there for the previews with popcorn and in your seat right when the lights go down, kind of a thing, then letting them know, and you're upset because they're always late and they're making you miss all of that, then telling them, hey, you know what? I really like to be a solid 20 minutes early. And, um, obviously it's not that big of a deal for you. So how about we just meet at the movie theater? And then that way you're not banging the head against the wall. But let's say you guys carpool together for work, or your kids carpool together and they're chronically late. You bring it up once, possibly you bring it up again. If they're not doing anything to correct uh, their behavior, and if their behavior is um, not working for you in some way, shape, or form, then that piece of it, there needs to be some sort of change made. So then you would stop carpooling with them. You know, doesn't mean that they're wrong or bad or any of that. It just means that um, this is a situation that's not working for you anymore. I'm trying to think of other um, kind of tactful. And frankly, I think tactfulness is synonymous with being direct. So again, it's not that you need to kind of walk on eggshells around them or do anything like that. Let's say they owe you money, and they say that they're going to pay you on Tuesday, and Tuesday comes and goes and you didn't hear from them. Calling them up and say, hey, I thought you were going to swing by and I don't know, pay me the $20 you owe me. Are you still planning on coming by tonight? or, um, or when will you be dropping it off? That kind of thing. Mentioning it at a minimum, bringing it up. Let's see. I understand. Magalodor says, I see what you're trying to very tactfully to say, but I respect people who are forthright with me. It's because I really don't understand subtlety and I find it confusing. Yes. Well, and this is why I was trying to make it clear that when a person's being assertive, there is no subtlety there. It is very direct. So um, it is the, hey, uh, I like to be at the movies 20 minutes early. And we had agreed that you would be at my house at, I don't know, 4:20, and then that would give us plenty of time to get to the theater. And you're here at 4:55. Now we're gonna be late, and I'm gonna miss the previews, and I'm gonna be all frazzled and whatever. So you're letting them know, like, this is not okay with me. So I hear you. I prefer that level of directness as well. Um, as long as it's not coming across as attacking, if it's not going along with belittling, any type of, like, verbally or emotionally abusive behavior, I do value that level of directness. I find it very refreshing as well. Oh boy. Magalodora says, oh, you missed what I did to my friends' clocks. Let me scroll up. Boy. Oh, well, thank you. Ember says, I went to do chores from her manic mother. It says her greeting was toxic screaming. So I went to see Blue Ninja, who gave me out of my book, Out of the Fog. I opened up to the part insincere remorse. It's perfect. Your writing is so savvy. Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Let me scroll. Okay. Oh, huh. Okay. Your example was a person running late. That's funny. He says, I had a friend who was always late. So I set his clocks back by 30 minutes and he was on time for the first time since I met him. LOL. Yes. And I've known a lot of people that have done that in the past. They've had a friend who's always chronically late. So they just start lying to them about the time that they need to be somewhere. And I know that can work but it doesn't, but then they catch on. That's the problem with this. And I'm just not a big fan of kind of lying anyhow. But to me, when a person is chronically late, it's a sign of disrespect. And it's basically them saying that your time doesn't matter, especially if they agree on it. If you agree, hey, I'm going to be there at this time, and they just kind of roll in whenever. Um, I don't do that. I don't tolerate that in my life. So I had a friend like that back in, like, middle school and high school. And it was absolutely infuriating. We'd have plans to go out and we're like, okay, man, we're going to leave. We're going to, of course, we were younger then. We would leave to go out at 10 o'clock. Now I'm way done for the night by 10 o'clock. But, we were just getting started back then. Get to her house. The plan was to leave at 10. We'd get there and she'd answer the door in a towel. She hadn't even gotten dressed, hadn't done her makeup, hadn't had dinner. Like, she was about a good hour and a half away from being ready to leave. It made all of us crazy. It was so frustrating. And finally, we got to the point of, we'll just meet you there. Like, You get there when, and she was livid with that. Of, how that she just thought that was so inconsiderate and rude. But yeah, that relationship didn't last that much longer because we just kind of realized, oh my gosh, she's incredibly manipulative. And if she doesn't get her way, then she has an absolute meltdown. And that's not okay. So yeah, Michelle says that, yeah, I agree about boundaries being a lifelong lesson to keep learning. Yeah. Yeah, they really, really are. Let's see. Jack asks, he asked about Roman, a little Chihuahua. He said, people want to know, where's Roman? Roman is my friend's dog, and he is living his best life with them out in Michigan. So, yes, I miss him terribly. Chihuahuas they're so cute. I just love them. Doreen asked, my live every Wednesday. I try to be 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you or anybody else is interested in knowing when I go live and getting I guess either a confirmation or a notification that I'm not going to be there, you can sign up for my text alerts. It's a free service. It's the only thing that you need to consider is like your data plan. Um, but you'll receive texts from me when I go live, and you text Dana live to the number 22999, and I send out texts about 10, 15 minutes or so before I go live on Wednesdays. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll. Yeah, Jennifer says, my boyfriend is Dutch and his culture is very direct and blunt, which I appreciate in him. However, I did bring up the tact part to him recently because I do think one gets done more with tact, at least in the US. I would agree. I think there's definitely a culture difference there. And I also agree with you. It's one of the things that I do tend to really appreciate about kind of European culture in general is that level of directness. Whereas there's so much that goes unsaid between, not even tactfully, just completely like unsaid here in the United States. So, uh, yeah, yeah, directness is appreciated, kind of when it's warranted, for sure. I had a friend. I had a whole living situation when I was in college the first time, and there we could have had our own reality show. You could not have picked four more different people to live in a house if you tried. We were radically different. And how we all managed to get, I don't even know if I'd say get along, how we all managed to live together under one roof is beyond me. It really is. But one of the gals I lived with, her name was Jen. Jen is a dear friend of mine, and she is very direct, very no nonsense. She's actually now she's an attorney, so which is not surprising at all because she just was uh, very direct and just kind of no nonsense personality. Anyways, we, the rest of us, the other three, all really struggled with being assertive. And this is back when, gosh, how old was I? Like 22, 23, I guess. Really struggled with being assertive, kind of this whole living situation. Everybody had their own way of doing stuff. We had one roommate who was incredibly messy. Uh, um, Jen and our other roommate, Carrie, they were both very tidy. I was somewhere in the middle. But it's ongoing issues. People leaving laundry in the dryer, people leaving dirty dishes in their room or dirty dishes in the sink or rotten food in the fridge. It's just roommate stuff, right? But that stuff's important to address it as it surfaces and not just kind of try to minimize it and hope it just magically goes away. Well, Jen would address stuff. She was very direct, and I absolutely loved that about her because you always knew where, and you always know where you stand with Jen. And that level of directness, but also more often than not, tact and humor she used. It it made her a very emotionally safe person because you knew she wasn't harboring any kind of ill feelings. You knew that um, she wasn't going to put on a smile and say that everything was fine when it wasn't. And she flat out told us this one day. I don't even remember what the situation was. I don't know. Somebody was mad, I'm sure, about something, laundry, food, people eating each other's food, whatever it was. And she just said to all of us, she's like, here's the deal. This, whatever is going on here, she's like, she's like, I'm not going to make it an issue for me until you let me know that it's an issue for me. And I remember thinking, um, like, really? Like you can just kind of detach and let it go and not fall into that, oh my gosh, are you guys upset and what's okay and what do I need to do to make it better, and all of that kind of ingratiating people pleasing behavior that was definitely my default. Where so that was my default. uh um Carrie would kind of, slam doors and kind of get quiet, but it was more, oh, and just very avoidant. She was very avoidant. She would just kind of stay up in her room or come home late or whatever. The other roommate, Susie, um, was very, very like scary aggressive, would really slam stuff around, stomping around, storming around, kind of aggressive, passive aggressive kind of stuff. So we ran the whole gamut of passive aggressive, aggressive, and assertive, all under one roof. It's a whole case study, a whole thesis unfolding underneath that roof for 3 years. Interesting, interesting stuff. But I remember at the time thinking, wow, really? Like you can just let it go and truly not let that affect you and not lose sleep. Uh, and yeah, she didn't. She totally let go. She's like, it's either an issue or it's not. And if it's not, then, you know, whatever. Like, don't think that I'm going to walk on eggshells if you guys are being quiet or, tiptoeing around or slamming doors or whatever the other two are doing. She's like, I'm not going to own any of that. Whatever message you're trying to send to me, she's like, I'm not receiving it. So until you can talk to me about it, it's not an issue. And I just loved that. I just I just adore her. Magladoro asked, did my roommate have avoidant personality disorder? No, she did not. She was just uh, uncomfortable with conflict. And that was her way of handling it. So everybody has a way of handling conflict. And we all tend to have more than one way, but we kind of have a default that we go into. So um, some people become very passive and compliant of, um, when there's conflict. I'd say people are arguing, the volume is getting louder in the room, the tension is increasing. If a person's more passive, they might become more compliant. Become more of like that peacekeeping thing. They're trying to find middle ground. They're trying to kind of control the situation, just kind of smooth everything out. Whereas a person who's maybe passive aggressive, um, might be like, oh, no, everything's fine. Everything's fine. I forgive you, or it's not an issue. And so they're saying one thing, but then their behavior is doing another. So their words tend to be that everything's fine, but their behavior is like, no, I guess everything's not fine. They're slamming doors, they're stomping around, they're creating this like icy tension in the room. Um, and then you have people that tend to avoid. So it's not necessarily passive in the sense of compliance. It's that um, kind of flight mode that they go into of, oh, yikes, it's tense in here. I'm out of here kind of thing. They leave and until things calm down. So let's see. Let me scroll up. Rick says, I never thought of Ypsilanti in Michigan as beautiful. He's like, I don't know who he's talking to in here. You should get up to Traverse City if we are ever let out again. Yeah, Traverse City is beautiful. The water there is, in some places, just crystal clear, like bath water, crystal clear. It's amazing that lake water could be so clear. Let me scroll up here. Shannon says, yeah, I hate when people are mad at me for no reason and then give me the cold shoulder. Well, the reality is that they do have a reason. They're just not sharing with you what that reason is. But that's also not to say that their reason is valid. A lot of people that have kind of very like dysfunctional, kind of twisted up views about accountability and responsibility and um, boundaries in general, that all leads to very inappropriate expectations of other people. So if a person's upset with you, sometimes that's why that they have, they're upset with you that you didn't, um, loan them $100, or that you didn't, um, it's that attitude of entitlement that you didn't do something for them, or um, they whatever their boundary that they had crossed was. But that's the thing too. Just because a person has a boundary crossed doesn't necessarily mean that that boundary is a reasonable one. Kind of like what we were talking about earlier. Somebody had mentioned like, well, what if this abusive person's in jail? And I was kind of extrapolating on that situation. Whether or not my extrapolation was accurate or not, I don't know. But uh, kind of giving this hypothetical situation, if this person's in jail and they were upset that um, their former partner wasn't accepting collect calls from them, for example. And now uh, I think most of us can understand, well, first off, you don't need to accept a collect call from somebody, right? Or a phone call at all, for that matter. But especially somebody that has been abusive, or that their behavior, especially if they're in jail, if their behavior has put them in jail, then that's on them. So, especially if they've done harm to you, you're not obligated. There is no, um, not only obligation, but there is no reasonable expectation that you would then go out of your way to somehow give them even more time and energy and money and support in that situation. But to a person with an entitlement mentality, which is a problem, they don't see that. They only see themselves of, well, I want to talk to you. I need money. I can't believe that you wouldn't give that to me. How outrageous, you jerk. Well, just because that's their issue with you doesn't make it a valid one. This is why it's so important to have a a functional, healthy understanding of where we start and end and where another person starts and end. So we're not taking on this level of like hyper responsibility or accountability for their actions or their feelings. Because if we can't tell the difference between dysfunctional versus functional behavior, it's very easy to get pulled off course by somebody like that, who, in the heat of the moment in a situation like that, that can, really kind of knock a person back of, oh my gosh, well, am I being inconsiderate or selfish for not wanting to, bail my brother out of jail for his third DUI? Like, does that make me selfish? So if you don't have a kind of a good grounding of what is and isn't okay with you, and um, kind of appropriate, or just boundaries with that, then it's easy to start kind of defaulting and acting acting in ways that another person wants us to act versus what we feel is right for us. These are such important skills, and they become even more so when we start dating and if we get married or if we're in a married relationship. Because again, it goes back to that three-legged race. A relationship is that three-legged race. So if one person trips and falls, both people trip and fall. That's why it's so important to be in sync with that, with how you move forward. So if you're in a relationship with somebody, and let's say, man, there's so much in common, there's effective communication, there's all of these, the emotional maturity, there's, um, you know, the things are really chugging along. Things are really, really smooth. But you come to realize that they are absolutely terrified of one of their parents. And they continually default into kind of being puppeted by guilt or obligation. Let's say their mother or their father or whoever it is calls them. I want you should come visit me and stay for a week for Christmas or 2 weeks for Christmas. Or I need money. I'm your mother. And you guys have it. You both have good salaries, and I need for you to fix this. And can you pay for, I don't know, $4,500 for a new water heater or whatever. And then getting upset if you say no. And then your spouse, or if your spouse is like, hey, we need to set some boundaries with this about where do we stand with loaning family money? Is there a dollar amount? Are we going to do it at all? Are we going to expect to get repaid, or are we just going to give them money and just completely write it off? Is this something that's going to be an ongoing thing? Is it going to be an event, or is it going to be a pattern? Are we going to talk to each other about it? So it's negotiating boundaries with each other's friends and family as a unit, instead of, um, you know, lying, kind of siphoning funds, sneaking around, kind of doing what this other person wants you to do, hoping that your significant other won't find out. That does not make for a good relationship. Let's see. Um, scrolling. Bonnie says, yes, this level of hyper responsibility. That's how I was. Yep. Yep. Me too. I can relate. Yep. Yvonne says people can have boundaries, but that doesn't mean that you have to adopt to their boundaries. Yes. Right. So let's say, for example, um, and again, this isn't even a hard and fast one. It's so going to depend on the person, the context, the relationship you have with them. The example I was going to give was, let's say your favorite color. Let Yeah, your favorite color is red, bright red, and you just always wear red all the time, and you just absolutely love it, and you are that's it. That's you. Just vibrant colors, but especially vibrant red. And you have, yeah, I don't know, you make a new friend or you're starting to date a new person, and they can't stand the color red. Well, they can have their preference, But at the end of the day, it's up to you as to whether or not you're um, willing to change, willing to not wear red. So just because they have a boundary, and they could even say, gosh, you know what, red just gives me extreme headaches. I can't handle it. Or red somehow just flips a switch inside of me and I just become really, really angry. Okay, maybe that's a little trickier. Then what? So if you're like, this is my absolute favorite color and I can't imagine not wearing red, then maybe that's going to change your dynamic a little bit. Or maybe you're like, you know what? Um, uh, I'm fine with kind of compromising. If it's too loud and it's giving you a headache, then I can, um, I don't know, wear something different when we're together, if that's not a big deal for you. This is why this is such an individual thing of kind of figuring out, okay, well, what do I want to compromise? What do I not want to compromise on? Um, let's see, I'm trying to think of another probably more common type of example. Cook food. Food is probably a good one. Um, certain foods that are very strong smelling, certain people don't like. Like, oh, I can't stand the smell of curry. That's probably a good one. Can't stand the smell of curry. And you're like, man, I live for curry. So how are we gonna do this? Then maybe if it's sort of like, okay, well, do you want me to give you a heads up, or I can open up some windows, or would a scented candle kind of help? Um, kind of carving out some middle ground. These are some potential solutions. So I don't know. You just have to that's where compromise kind of comes in with these situations. Monica says, Dana, now that I'm 9 months out and divorced, I feel so free, but I realized that I neglected myself so much. I need to get dentures at the age of 30, and I just feel so sorry for myself. Well, congratulations on being out for 9 months and in feeling so free. That's wonderful. So congratulations, yay you for that. And yeah, it's a really painful realization to come to terms with the fact of, oh my gosh, I lost myself in this relationship. And especially with something like that just really can make it very clear of how much you neglected yourself, of, oh my gosh, I need to get dentures at the age of 30. How did I get to this place? And um, I do think that there is a time and place, and it's important in healing to give yourself that grace and compassion. Uh, it's not, and it's not a pity party. It's not, and I'm not sure if that was the way that you had intended it, but like, it's not that you're just feeling sorry for yourself, but there's giving yourself that true grace and compassion of, oh my gosh, I'm saddened by how much of myself I lost in that, and that I'm here. That's, I think, normal and appropriate, and frankly, a very beautiful way to handle that. And to acknowledge, yeah, you lost a lot of yourself. But on the plus side, it sounds like you are moving forward into truly kind of making up for lost time and tripling up on your self-care and your self-love, which so much of that is just long overdue. It's never too late to start loving yourself. So I'm really glad that you're starting to do it now and starting to really see your value. And uh, yeah, and I just hope that this next chapter in your life is the best one yet. Okay, so let me scroll up here. Monica says, is it easy to prove mental abuse? Normally, it would be more, well, I guess it depends on where you are, like what country you live in, and what their criteria is for prosecuting abuse. So, mental abuse normally, um, most places categorize like quote unquote mental abuse as emotional abuse, which tends to also cover psychological abuse. So if you have, a lot of it's going to depend on kind of where you live and what um, kind of evidence that you have of that. At a minimum, there tends to be, you might be able to find some attorneys through like a local domestic violence agency if they have a referral list, and contacting them and having, or even really any attorney. Frankly, most of them have like an initial complimentary consultation, so you can say, okay, here's my situation. And then they'll let you know kind of, okay, if we were to move forward and try to prosecute this, then this is, they'd be able to give you like a review of any potential case that you would have. So let's see, Jennifer's talking about Ann Arbor. She says, yeah, it's a beautiful and interesting city. I really like it. Yeah, I do too. Ann Arbor has a fun thing where downtown, they have, I don't even know how it started. They have all of these little doors like for ferries. There's kind of this whole kind of I don't know, mythos about there's fairies that live in Ann Arbor, and it's so cute. So there's just all of these little tiny decorated doors. Some of them have like a little mailbox out front, or a little flower garden or whatever. And I guess it's just different shopkeepers that have kind of carried on this tradition, but it's a lot of fun. I think it's especially a lot of fun for kids too, to kind of spot the different fairy doors around town. Let's see here. Magalodora asks, Dana, have you ever been to Lake Mead in Nevada? The water there is also crystal clear. It's amazing. No, I haven't. I haven't. I had no idea. That's really cool. Yeah, that's my kind of water. Like, I like to know what I'm swimming with. Yeah. Other the fish and the, I don't know, algae and all of that. I just like to see it. Um, w- People are talking about kind of this, how to say this, kind of people whose behavior runs the gamut of, they're saying that they're fine, but then they're not acting fine. A lot of it in this book that we're going to discuss for book club, a lot of that uh, really directly ties into um, kind of this inability for a person to be assertive. So it's not uncommon for people with borderline personality disorder, or those with that anxious style of attachment, which tends to go hand in hand with borderline personality disorder. But those with an anxious attachment style uh, tend to really not like to rock the boat. So it's sort of like, well, if I speak up and if I say, hey, there's a problem, or hey, I don't like this, or if I voice my concerns, then what if that other person leaves? And that can be absolutely terrifying. Of, well, if they leave, then kind of what will become of me? And it can truly, and that's coming from that wounded child within them of, um, and sometimes you can even see it in somebody that has that anxious style of attachment of, it's really wild to see, like, boom, this person kind of all of a sudden shifts into a terrified, um, young child, 5-year-old, 10-year-old, and um, kind of their responsiveness is their ways of responding are just very, very out of character for them. And it's that fear of abandonment. So if there was an abandonment earlier on in life that's gone kind of unaddressed and or unnoticed by anybody, um, and just was never healed, then they kind of stopped at that emotional. Um, they stopped kind of maturing. There was a wound there at that emotional age, and so because that hasn't been healed, they boom, like instantly kind of regress back to that. It's really wild to see. It's tragic and it's heartbreaking, but um, it's a very real thing. And um, so kind of the result of that, when that person has that more of that anxious style of attachment, is that kind of people pleasing, ingratiating behavior. The result of that is they don't have much of an identity. They don't feel comfortable with boundary standards and deal breakers because they don't like rejection and they don't like the ending of relationships. That's profoundly painful for them. It's profoundly painful for everybody, but especially for a person who the ending of a relationship feels like the same level of loss as a death. Like it's very significant. And so if a person's not comfortable with conflict or confrontation, then the result of this is a lot of times what we talk about here on this channel, but it's a little different than um, with those that are like on the narcissist side of the spectrum, but with on more of the borderline side of the spectrum, um, it's that same idealize and devalue. So, but it's the driving behavior behind it, or the driving motivation behind it's very different. So, for a person that has that anxious style of attachment, they tend to go between idealize and devalue. Of, oh my gosh, you're so amazing, I love you so much. It's very ingratiating. It's very much putting this other person on a pedestal. It's kind of only seeing everything good about them. But then once that person kind of starts showing signs of generally either being human or setting boundaries or um, mainly setting boundaries, I think is a big one, because boundaries tend to register as rejection. And then rejection equals abandonment, kind of a thing. So they can go between uh, idealization and that devaluation. And if you've ever experienced that with somebody, what you'll also see is they're profoundly uncomfortable with assertive behavior, because assertive behavior is it's kind of what they fear of. Okay, let's talk about an issue, but in their mind, they're always waiting for that other shoe to drop. Of okay, this person's going to reject me or this relationship's going to be over. So if somebody else is assertive, they're profoundly uncomfortable with it. I have a person, a family member in my life who it's very anxiety inducing for me because I don't ever fully know where she stands, because it's that idealization, or it's where things build up, build up, build up, and it's that slow devaluation in her mind, and then there's that explosion. And instead of kind of sincere accountability, it goes back to that idealization again, which is a lot of like that ingratiating behavior and kind of excessive people pleasing and all of that. So it's yeah, living with an anxious style of attachment or being on the receiving end of a person with a anxious style of attachment can be really challenging. But thankfully, there are resources out there, and there are um, therapies and treatments out there to help a person kind of move more towards that secure attachment. It's not easy, but it can be done. Okay, so let me scroll down to the bottom here. Jennifer says, I think that's my attachment style. I hate conflict and confrontation. It took everything in me to call my sister today to tell her I can't be at her wedding since my dad is going to be there. So much anxiety. I think it has to do something with that fear of abandonment, since I have the dependent personality disorder. Well, I think is definitely part of it. And I think you nailed it in terms of fear of abandonment and that anxious style of attachment. Um, Yeah. And, with that dependent personality disorder, that's a very difficult way to live too, because it's sort of this feeling of I can't, I can't meet my own needs. So I needed to look to others to help me meet them. And that is, you know, that's a very hard way to live. So yeah. Yeah. But good on you for having that boundary and saying that you're not going to be there at her wedding since your father's going. So yay you for that, especially facing all of the anxiety that you had speaking up for yourself. Yeah. Lady G says, yeah, my spouse deals with his anxious attachment style by agreeing to whatever I want and then secretly doing what he wants and then lying to cover it up. Yep. That's one way. There's lots of different ways that kind of anxious style of attachment surfaces, but I think kind of the commonality there, it's that feeling of I'm not going to rock the boat. And there's all kinds of problems whenever anybody's not being authentic and they're not being they don't have that open, honest, sincere, solutions oriented communication when solutions orientedness is appropriate, right? When they don't have that level of communication, they don't have that um, kind of ability to be present in the relationship, especially if they're going to say yes and then go do whatever they want. You agree that, hey, this is our budget for this month, and then they agree, and then they go, slide, uh, a friend of theirs $100, kind of a thing, and then hope you just don't catch them, or they go, I don't know. They say that they're going to be home by 10. They know exactly that they're not going to be home by 10. They're trying to avoid an argument, but really they're going to go out with some, I don't know, they're going to go out for a beer with their friend, or they're going to go watch the game, or whatever they're going to go do. Uh and and then they have to create this big story. Oh, I was going to be there, and but then the car got a flat tire and this and that, and it's all because they're just really uncomfortable saying no, or saying, hey, I really would like to go do this. So it's amazing how difficult it can be to just be honest and be direct. Let's see. Very cool. Embers is talking to Lady G and says, I filled up my buckets after abuse by joining meetups like music jams and a weekly library writing group where I performed memoir slam poems. Find what is your bliss and be brave trying. I love that. I love that. That all sounds like a ton of fun. You have some good meetups in your area. And I am somewhat jealous. Uh, and real quick, I missed, I think, part of the conversation, but I think this and that this so this I guess what I'm saying is what I'm going to say now might be very off base, but it kind of mm, sparked something that I think is worth addressing. So there's comments in the chat about somebody's behavior that seems kind of passive aggressive. I'm not sure if they're talking about how this person handled the situation or what, but I just wanted to I guess, kind of make it known that when people, all of us, start learning any new skill, especially especially stressful ones, like being assertive and speaking up or setting boundaries, there's absolutely a learning curve to it. And so people kind of oh, it's like what are those, not ping pong, um pinball, like a pinball machine. you kind of go like ding, 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 back and forth in all of these different directions before you really kind of figure out the flow. So it's very, very common. I frankly have never seen anybody just kind of learn these skills and then go do it perfectly. It's it's a lot of trial and error, and it's self-evaluation, and kind of this you know, just reflection on how things went afterwards. So it's not uncommon for people, if you've been, let me say, if you've been uncomfortable speaking up and being assertive and getting really grounded in, your wants, your needs, your thoughts, your feelings, your opinions, if you've kind of learned to just keep quiet about that and be kind of quote unquote go with the flow, or uh, yeah, basically being passive until your boundaries are crossed, they're crossed, they're crossed, they're crossed, they're crossed, they're stomped on, they're crossed, they're crossed, they're crossed, until one day you just explode. And a lot of people confuse well, and then people explode, but then they start voicing everything that's been kind of gnawing at them for so long. And they confuse this exploding with being assertive, because they finally let the other person know, hey, what you did isn't okay. So Magaladoro, if you're still here, this is probably a better example of kind of some of the differences here with setting boundaries. So uh, getting so fed up and then kind of quote unquote setting somebody straight in a very aggressive way. I told you 4:30, damn it, why aren't you here? I can't believe you do this. You obviously don't care anything about me. Blah, 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 blah. Really letting if what you're doing falls under the umbrella of letting the other person have it, okay, that's aggressive. That's not assertive. Assertive is letting uh, that boundary cross be known in a very direct, kind of emotionally neutral way. Like, you're delivering the news that this is not okay with you. It's not there's not emotional reactivity, there's no intimidation, there's no aggression, there's no fear coming from on your end. So, but it's very common when people start finding their voice to first get in tune with it. Well, and with anything, kind of it's figuring out the edges of that puzzle. It's figuring in normally when how we start doing that is we start figuring out kind of what's not okay with us. Well, when we figure out what's not okay with us, that tends to be things that are really painful. And then we realize, okay, that's not okay. And then we make that known, but we tend to do that in a very aggressive way. And then with time, we kind of realize, okay, well, hopefully we realize, okay, um, this is aggressive. This is not me, speaking my mind or not putting up with stuff or whatever. Like, this is me being aggressive, and that's it. That's not okay. There needs to be some middle ground there, and getting clear on how this behavior surfaces in you. What does it look like? What is the difference between being passive, being aggressive? And then, so then people kind of pinball down to passive aggressive, where they're like, okay, like, I don't want to be aggressive, but oh my God, I'm really, really angry, but I'm going to try to not show my anger. And so I'm going to tell people that I'm fine because I'm trying to not be aggressive. And uh, so I'm, like, I'm going to kind of say one thing, but then my body language is going to say something else. And the point being is it takes time, and it takes practice. And also it takes, there's kind of this like layers of awareness that kind of come with time, of all of the different ways that you experience your boundaries in every moment of every day. And that can be very strange at first, of realizing, oh my gosh, my boundaries are changing every moment of every day. And uh, it can feel like a lot to juggle at first, of kind of how to assert yourself and still kind of be present and meet the needs of other people. But if you've ever driven a stick shift, at first it's really overwhelming, but then after, and I'm like really aging myself now because probably I don't know how many people out there don't even know how to drive a stick shift anymore, but it's a lot. Like you have the clutch, you have the gas, you have the brake, you've got the emergency brake, you're shifting, you're downshifting. There's a lot going on, and uh, uh, you know, it seems like you're never going to get it at first. There's like a high level of concentration involved, and then over time, it just becomes second nature, and you're doing it effortlessly, and then it's even kind of fun. So, boundaries are kind of the same way. So, yeah, it's interesting. Huffle Mom was saying the more angry I get, the more aggressive I tend to get. It's infuriating. Afterwards, I tend to withdraw. I beat on myself and I seriously feel ashamed. Yeah, this kind of stuff, it's difficult to slow down in the moment, especially anger. You know, uh, when when people get angry, our brain goes into fight or flight mode. When our brain goes into fight or flight mode, the the logic and critical thinking parts of our brain, the higher order functioning of our brain, it's like the volume gets way turned down. So they're running at bare minimum capacity. Depending on how angry we are, sometimes they're not even online. This is why you see people do really erratic things when they're in fight or flight. They run into burning buildings, they run into traffic, they uh, have really extreme behavior. And this is the challenge kind of with addressing anger, um, is it's difficult to slow it down because there's like that relay switch in your brain. So when it kicks on, it's very difficult. I mean, it's a uphill climb to pull it back. And anger tends to escalate more often than not. So it's challenging. I feel the same way when I get really angry. There's times where um, disagreements or whatever, that I handle things less than ideal. Um, and there's and it's very easy to get really down on ourselves and to just feel horrible, like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe, kind of, where did that come from? I cannot believe that I handled that like that. Here's an example in my own life, and this is a mild example. Okay, the other night Paul and I were having a conversation about something. Oh, I was telling him about this training I went through, and I was absolutely exhausted, and he'd had a long day too. And uh, so my I guess my I don't I was tired. My patience level just really wasn't there, and uh, w- and the conversation, he just kind of kept changing the topic, or was I felt like he was wanting to kind of challenge every point that I was bringing up. And it was just, I was feeling really frustrated. We since talked about it. And he's like, no, absolutely not. Like, that was not my intention at all. He was trying to kind of see what I was explaining from multiple sides. And I just wanted to share my day. Like, I didn't want him to play devil's advocate or to kind of play the contrarian. And so it got to the tail end of it. And I forget the conversation had shifted to, and I was so frustrated and I rolled my eyes. Okay. And again, this is kind of a mild thing, but that's still really rude. And he was really upset by that. Like, really? Like, how rude? Like, you're going to roll your eyes at me. And I thought, God, here I am. I'm a therapist. Like, here I am rolling my eyes. I mean, it was so um, not okay. And, uh, you know, and so, yeah. So I guess the point is, uh, yeah, we all have those moments. It's kind of how we handle them that makes the difference. And one of the other things that I noticed about myself was that I had been feeling this. I think this, the reason I'm sharing is I think this is a good example of kind of just this layers of pulling back, pulling back, pulling back. So while we were having this conversation, I was getting more and more frustrated. You know, he was asking what I felt kind of like contrarian or challenging questions. I wasn't up for like a debate. I'm just trying to share with him this training. I didn't say anything. I just kind of kept letting things slide, or I'd answer his questions and then kind of hope that I guess the thinking was, well, I just hope he stops doing that. But I wasn't saying anything. So I was just, it was, my frustration was building and building and building on my side. And then it, it didn't like fully erupt, but it erupted in me kind of getting huffy and then like rolling my eyes, which is still not okay. And then realizing, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I just sat there for like 10 minutes feeling so frustrated and I didn't say anything. Like this whole situation could have been avoided had I nipped that in the bud earlier and just kind of said, hey, I just want to share my day with you, you know. And he probably would have said, oh, well, um, I'm just asking questions. I'm not playing devil's advocate. Because in his mind, that was the truth. But then this is, of course, this is kind of this like post game day analysis, right? So, because we talked about this later, and so then my response, a better response for me would have then been, well, so obviously bring it up right when that first started happening, not letting it build. But had he said, hey, I don't mean to be playing devil's advocate. I'm just interested. Like, did you think about it from this angle, or did they address this angle, or did this, or that? And I could have redrawn my boundary of, uh, I don't know. I'm just trying to, I just want to share my day with you. So, and I don't have the kind of the mental bandwidth to, um, to kind of explore all avenues. I've just sat through a 10-hour training. It was actually 30 hours in 3 days, but 10-hour, the last day was 10-hour training. Like I'm absolutely exhausted. I was just wanting to share some of these points with you. Can we address, if you have other questions, can we just pick this up conversation up tomorrow? That would have been a better way to handle it. And I think he would have been okay with it. I would have been okay with it. And the like things would have been fine. So, uh, but let's take that same kind of conversation. Had that happened, let's say 15 years ago, for sure, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I um, would I would have felt really frustrated. I would not have said anything. I probably would have been kind of huffy and rolled my eyes. Then I would have felt terrible about that and then circled around to really ingratiating behavior of just, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be so rude. And I would have felt absolutely terrible. And the need to go to great lengths to um, kind of restabilize that relationship. And so it's interesting kind of uh, the changes like how our response to things kind of evolves over time. So for the first, when I really began learning about like boundaries and standards and deal breakers and stuff, I understood some of like the more kind of low hanging fruit type situations, but stuff like that was on the more mild end of, I'm well intended, he's well intended, this conversation is well intended. uh, there's still boundaries being crossed here by both people, right? um, and but even still, even though the intentions are good, the people are good, they're everything else is good, there were still some skills there that were kind of coming in after the fact. And so it was good that um, we were both able to address that, be fully accountable for our own part in that, and then uh, kind of just go through that game day analysis together and figure out what we could have done differently, and then what we will do differently next time. That makes the ocean a difference versus 15, 20 years ago, any relationship I would have been in, I would have never thought to talk to the other person about it. Not in a million years, except to just apologize profusely and feel terrible about it. Just feel really, really guilty and ashamed. So that's the progress, the progress of it all. Uh, okay, let me scroll up here. Um, yes, that's really, really well said, Bonnie. She says, yeah, letting things slide. Exactly. Sometimes too much patience is not a virtue. Yes. Yes. Well said. And that's a great example of one of these traits that, we're all kind of conditioned to think, oh, this is good. This is good. Patience is good. Compassion is good. Empathy is good. Forgiveness is good. Commitment is good. These things are good. However, like with anything else, if it's not in the context, if it's not couched in functional, healthy boundaries, standards, and deal breakers, then it can be a problem, because yes, there is such a thing as too much patience, or too much compassion, or too much um, or inappropriate, like inappropriate levels of forgiveness, inappropriate kind of boundary busting. That's probably a even better way to say boundary busting forms of patience or consideration or compassion. Loaning or giving people money you don't have, giving, signing up for things, saying yes when you kind of giving of yourself more than you can comfortably give. There's no virtue in that. That's a problem. So kind of sacrificing ourselves in order to make others happy, or to make um, to kind of avoid saying no, or to not upset other people, or whatever it might be, like that's a problem. So uh, you know these traits are all really beautiful, but only within that context of healthy boundaries, standards, and deal breakers. Okay, let's see. Oh my gosh, are we really? Is it really 11:30? Um, Garguller, I probably did not pronounce that correctly, says, sometimes people just want to be sick. They don't want to fight for their peace. Fighting for peace is a hard path. This is why it's so important for kind of the relationships that we have with others, that the other person has kind of a workable degree of accountability, of um, responsibility, of effective communication, and really a desire for introspection and a desire for personal growth. Without that, exactly what you said, some people aren't um, aren't interested in having relationships work, and they might not even be aware of it. So that's kind of what's can be so tragic about it. So if those skills aren't there, which those skills are basically uh, they're very needed for a relationship to function to any degree. If those aren't there, then there's only going to be kind of dysfunctional ways of handling a situation. So instead of assertive communication, you're going to get passive, passive aggressive, or aggressive. Any of those three don't work in the long run. That relationship's imbalanced right away. And if that balance doesn't get corrected, it's going to eventually topple over. So, yeah. So kind of realizing, gosh, okay, having common interests with other people, that's great. Like that's a big step in the right direction. Chemistry is important. But those kind of higher order level of needs of, um, effective communication, emotional maturity, these kinds of things, that's the foundation. That's a true foundation of a relationship. The relationship's not going anywhere. If you can't talk to the other person, if they can't talk to you, if there's really blurred ideas about accountability and responsibility and, um, they have a complete inability to accept responsibility for their actions, if they have an entitlement mentality, like it's, the relationship is only going to grow to uh, the lowest limitations of the person, of either person that are in there. So whoever has like the most kind of underdeveloped skills, that's where that relationship's going to stop. So all those other things could be there. People could be very emotionally mature. They could have everything. But if there isn't, let's say if there's not appropriate boundaries in place, or if there's not appropriate expectations, that relationship's it's gonna stall out at that point, because that's the part that's missing. And until that, piece of the puzzle gets in place, you know, it's it's going to continue to register as a deficit and as a problem, because it is. So, um, okay, let's see here. Well, I think with that said, let's end, because we're over, and yeah, and I think I'm gonna go to bed soon. So, but before we kind of wrap up, I'd like to share with you guys an exercise, visualization exercise that I learned the other day that I really enjoy. That I think if anybody's struggling with anxiety or, yeah, anxiety mainly, trouble sleeping, these kinds of things, this exercise can help. So, the exercise is for you to visualize a container. It can be any type of container, any size. The only stipulations for this container is that it needs to have a one-way valve. So you can put something into it and then you can take something out of it. And the container is large enough and comfortable enough that it can hold kind of any of the thoughts that are swirling around in your mind. And kind of the comfortable enough part of it is to kind of feel relieved that, or reassured, I should say, that whatever thoughts are swirling around in your mind can exist comfortably in this container. So, for example, if you're having thoughts about your child or um, somebody that you care about, you putting them in kind of in this like holding space. Yeah, you want to make sure that, okay, they're comfortable, they enjoy being there, these thoughts enjoy being there, this is a good thing. So it just helps your brain let go a little bit easier. I've heard people kind of give examples of the container that they have. One person mentioned that theirs was a mason jar, like a pretty good sized mason jar. But then they realized that a clear mason jar wasn't working for them. that a tinted, like an indigo blue, or like a what do they call it? Kind of the depression glass, green or blue glass, that they liked that better because then it was more opaque. So they couldn't see into it. And that's what they needed to help kind of let go of those thoughts. My container is the bottle from the show I Dream of Jeannie. So it's this beautiful kind of Moroccan styled, very intricate um, bottle. And on the inside, it's this really plush, comfortable, beautiful velvet everywhere. It's just very comfortable, very lounge like. And so the goal with this container, after you kind of have an idea of what your container would be, what it would look like, what size it would be, you can get into as much or as little detail as you'd like. Thinking about at night, putting the container in a corner of your room, might be in a corner that you can see, so you know exactly where it is. And then kind of making a mental note of, okay, what what's still swimming around in my mind? And let me go ahead and put that all in the container now. And if it makes you feel better, you can kind of visualize there's different like quadrants to the container. So each thought kind of has its own space. It's whatever works for you. And then when you're ready in the morning, then you by all means can open up the container and you can pull things out one at a time, or just simply pull out one and then keep the rest in there until you're ready to yeah, to think about it or to address it. Yeah, it's wonderful. It really does help. So, okay. Well, with that said, we'll do a very quick guided imagery or guided meditation kind of thing. So take a moment and find a comfortable place. Perhaps sitting, perhaps lying down. Allow yourself to get comfortable. And taking a few breaths, just easy breaths in through your nose, down into your stomach, and exhaling, allowing you to settle into the present moment, releasing any regret or pain from the past, releasing any stress or anxiety about the future. Maybe even when you go to visualize releasing the past or the future, thinking about it in terms of like releasing them as balloons, as helium balloons, like they just easily and effortlessly just float away. And settling into this present moment. Becoming present in your body and noticing the temperature in the room. Is it cool or is it warm? Noticing any other sounds around you, or possibly sounds from outside. Noticing any smells that might linger in the air, perhaps from when you cooked lunch or dinner earlier. Noticing what you feel And perhaps it's the feel of the fabric of the clothes that you're wearing, or the fabric or the surface in general of what you're sitting on or what you're laying on. Noticing, is it soft or is it kind of coarse? Is it firm or is it more cushiony? Now bringing your attention down into the tips of your toes, down into the tips of your fingers, being fully conscious in this moment, being fully conscious in your body, realizing that you can become your own peaceful place. And realizing that there is so much that is good and right about you. So much that truly is good and right about you. Acknowledging how far you've come. And I think taking some time to just celebrate that. I mean, for real, yay you. Yay you. You've been through some really major stuff, and you're still here and you're still moving forward. And that's amazing and inspiring. And continuing to breathe. If it helps, you can put one hand over your chest and then the other on your stomach. And so as you breathe, breathing in deep to where the hand on your stomach rises and falls, and the hand on your chest doesn't. That's when you know you're really taking in some good, deep belly breaths. And because you are moving forward into becoming your own peaceful place, realizing that at any time, whenever you're feeling anxious or stressed, that you can give these feelings of peacefulness to yourself, that you can take a quick time out and do exactly what we were doing, taking in some of those deep belly breaths, using that visualization of kind of holding on to balloons in each hand and letting go of the events of kind of the fear and the regret or any any uncomfortable feelings of the past, letting that go, realizing that you can still keep yourself safe, that letting go of these uncomfortable emotions doesn't mean that anything that happened to you um, was somehow okay, or um, that you'll forget. You can still keep all of those lessons learned, all of acknowledging what happened, and then letting go of any of those uncomfortable emotions that you're ready to let go of. And then with the future, if there's any stress or anxiety, any swirling thoughts, easily and effortlessly, just letting them go and allowing yourself to be fully present in the moment. Realizing that you do have control over how much peace you can bring into your life. And even doing very simple, short little exercises like this, just allowing yourself this time is very powerful, and you have control over this. Okay, and so now when you're ready, let's go ahead and open your eyes and come on back. So, okay. So with that said, thank you everybody for being here, and I really look forward to seeing you guys next week. Again, if you're interested in subscribing to these text alerts, if you're in the US or Canada and would like to be notified of when I go live, you can text the word Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. And if you have a question that you'd like me to address on the chat, you can email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. So thank you guys so much. And just, yeah, you're not alone. You're not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care.